Good afternoon, councillors, staff, members of the gallery. Welcome to the ordinary monthly meeting of Armidale Regional Council. I'd invite you to be upstanding, please, for the affirmation. Deputy Mayor O'Brien.
We, the councillors of the Armidale region, declare that we will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of our community and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions invested in us to the best of our skill and judgment.
Thank you. Recognition of traditional owners. Councillor Bailey.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Armidale region community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture.
Thank you. Please be seated. The General Manager for other announcements, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A statement in relation to live streaming of council meeting or webcasting. This meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised by council to do so. In terms of the public address on the agenda and have your say, all speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or uses abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individual. And just a reminder, with mobile phones, we'd please ask that you turn those off for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr General Manager. There are no apologies or leave of absence applications. Disclosure of interests, councillors. Councillor Marat.
I've got a non-pecuniary, non-significant conflict with the Transport Museum item 10.2. I'm involved in the design of the building for the museum. I intend to stay in the meeting, but not vote.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, well, I'm moving out of town to get my house to the area for health and therefore I would get a lot of research and welfare and health and safety.
We're declaring interests, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Robinson, what is your interest, please? You're going to absent yourself from 12.7 because? Okay, thank you. As a major user of the rail trail in due course, I love the optimism. Any other declarations of interest? No. We move to the community group presentations or public forums. I'd like to first of all invite Dr. Jim Scott, the President of Visions for Armidale Creeklands Incorporated, to address us. Thank you, Jim. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr Mayor, and good afternoon, councillors and General Manager and staff and colleagues. There's a couple of my colleagues here, one of our committee, Martin Levins, and another one over there, Henny Solomon, and one of our earlier committee members, Isabel Solomon. Good to see you here. So here's our likely lot listed up there, our current committee I'm speaking on behalf of today. And just remind you of the aim of our group. If you haven't read it already on our website, we aim to assist in the careful planning, design and development of beautiful, healthy, safe public spaces featuring wetlands, lagoons and billabongs connected by flowing water along the Armidale Creeklands. We started many years ago, perhaps even before this, for me personally, when I started cycling along the John Fales Cycleway, which I think was opened in 1981, which is when I arrived in Armidale and started cycling most days to work for 28 years up and down the creeklands. So I had a bit of time to contemplate the creeklands. But in 2002, about 70 likely people got together and had a meeting about the creeklands and thought, wouldn't it be good if we improved the creeklands? And we tried. But quite a few years elapsed, and the Urban River Care group got going at about 2002 and started removing woody weeds and planting native veg, and have done a wonderful job with their hundreds of volunteers. But by 2017, a few of us thought, gee, we still haven't sent a lot of water in the creeklands, so let's form a group, let's incorporate, let's get a bit more serious about developing ideas from the community. So we did that, and we presented to the then council in June 2017, and we had an administrator at the time, the current mayor, Dr. Ian Tiley was administrator, and he and his staff thought our presentation was okay, and based on that they said, let's have a consultancy on the creeklands. So they did that for a limited part of the creeklands, and that was McGregor Coxall. So here we are, meeting with one of the consultants and the community that was brought together in a wonderful way by those consultants to develop their master plan. We've taken a number of bus trips with our group to engage the community from the end of the west to the east of the town. For those of you who don't know the creeklands well, you can see those things on our website. We had another bus tour to talk about water, and looked at these, considered the various reservoirs that supply water, and we thought, where are we going to get some water from? And we had a chap with us from Darling Irrigation, Sam Maroulis, who volunteered his time, and the former manager of water and sewer in Armidale, Mike Porter, who's one of our members. And they were terrific in leading us on this bus tour and explaining things. And after that, we've reflected on our 9 sites which we had selected back in 2019, where we'd like to see some water, some billabongs, some wetlands, etc. I'm not going to go through those, but if you look over on the right-hand side, we added that line, that red line, the overflow from the settling ponds from the water treatment works. Mike explained to us, Mike Porter, that 5 megalitres every day, even in the drought, flows over the top of those settling ponds and goes down that little creek to the eastern end of town, near the, just west of the Cooks Road Bridge. And it was at that point that Sam Maroulis, the irrigation engineer, said, well, why not recycle that 5 megalitres a day, even in drought, all the way back up to the university? And we thought, well, that's a good idea. So he did some calculations on the back of his envelope, which is shown here, and we're not going to read through any of that, but the bottom line you can see down there is $363,000 to lay a big plastic pipe in the bottom of the creek, to not to dig it in with a lot of excavation, but to lay it under the water and do minimal movement of earth. And we thought that was quite an extraordinary proposition. But that's 7.3 kilometres of pipe installed for that a couple of years ago. And that may or may not be a sound thing to do, but it was for free. We got that advice, and we thought that was pretty interesting. Another bus tour, we've reached out to the Aboriginal community, and we had a wonderful visit with them in visiting various parts that they see as crucial, and there's more involvement of them with the Black Gully Creek billabongs in a moment. So what are our visions? Note that our term is visions plural. We don't pretend to tell everybody what their visions should be, but you can see here quite clearly in Civic Park, the jewel of the town, you can see in a dryish time versus a wettish time what it looks like. And if only we think, if we could slow water down, what a good thing. We've got other visions. We've talked about the architecture, the feeling of the town. The master plan talks about the architectural heritage of the town and how it could be made more beautiful. Here we have the 1928 Marsh Street Bridge, which is pretty glorious. but maybe in 2028 we could have a reconciliation bridge. We reckon that bridge in Parramatta looks pretty good, along with the work they've done there to improve the Parramatta River and the precinct there. It's quite beautiful, and the number of people who enjoy it is quite stunning. It's all about water, isn't it? And here we see just a little contrast from the heart of our city, from the dry time to a less dry time now. Look at this view of water. See it in the foreground there, that little creek from the drone? That's our water in Armidale. That's Turmeric Creek, which is interfered with by a big dam, 13 kilometres from Armidale. But this is our beautiful city from Marsh Street, reaching up to Faulkner Street, to Danga Street. Those two encompassing Central Park, the cathedrals, the placement of the city, and wouldn't it be nice to link it better to some lovely water features down by the creeklands. Here we were looking for more visible water in our group, more healthy water, pools, riffles and streams which are natural in this environment. And here we see, looking west towards Taylor Street, some of the wonderful trees that have been revegetated by the Urban River Care Group, but not much of a glimpse of water, even from a drone. Now, we reckon we need continuously flowing water. Here it is on the right-hand side near Cooks Road Bridge. That's benefiting from 5 megalitres a day that enters there and goes down the Macleay Gorge. But on the left-hand side near the Ex-Services Club in a dry time, we've got a bicycle and a bit of poor quality water. Our primary focus is to enhance this creeklands as an environment, to restore natural levels of water flow, slow it down along our creek, and consider how we can do that, including how we can link to the 13 kilometres away Turmeric Dam. We want healthy oxygenated water every day, and we want more healthy life. And even when one engineers a pond of water, there's a bit of wildlife liking that, some native swans, and that's in fact Turmeric Dam, which has become very naturalised, and of course we're investing a lot of money to improve it at the moment. So the Creeklands Master Plan was released last year, as you know, and we were delighted to see it, and we think it's a very comprehensive publication. We think it's a good start. But note that it was finished in 2018, and haven't we had a drought since then? The most extraordinary dry time that's brought water to the fore of all of our minds. And so here in our city, we don't have an assured water source. It's been over 50 years since we had a major investment in water infrastructure, and we really think this is related to how water can move through the city and even be delivered to water parklands with untreated water, where recently, in recent times, some playing fields have been watered with potable water. We think that's an extraordinary thing. Now, the community submissions are a real treasure trove. 23 submissions were made to the master plan. They're embedded in 60 pages plus in the attachments to the October meeting. The attachments were 1,200 pages. I don't know if you read all the 1,200, I haven't, but I've read all the 60 plus pages of these relating to the creeklands. A number of people have talked about this link between Armidale and Turmeric Dam and how it could be made more beautiful, and no doubt it can. So the top left is near the Concert Davis Fields at the university with some beautiful casuarinas. Couldn't we link that with bike paths and waterways and all sorts of things to Turmeric Dam one day, perhaps? Another mention quite a number of times in the submissions, including from the University Aquatic Ecology people, is for constructed wetlands. And here we see some at the bottom, not in Armidale, but they're in a little town called Pinaroo in South Australia, that a couple of our members brought back some images of some beautiful wetlands, and we say, why not? Some of the other submission points safety, fire hazards. Look at some of those images of burnt out cars. But a lot of mention of nature, of habitat, nature play area, the labyrinth, approval of the village green concept, the creek crossings during flood, parking, footpaths, transport. Now what we submitted was summarised in one line in the document to the October meeting from our group, and it said that we approved work on the contaminated soil. Well, we were excited to see the map of the contaminated soil for the first time, to have it out there, to have it public. We want that information. And yes, we want us to deal with it, this generation, to overcome these legacy problems from the previous gasworks. But there were 9 points in total, and I just want to alert you to it. I don't want you to read that. I just want you to know we wanted more reference to the Aboriginal community, the sporting groups, the university. We want there to be more natural flow rates. We want them to be restored. There was a whole bunch of things we put in our submission, and it didn't quite encapsulate it, just that one line. And that's from our group. And we wonder from the other 22 submissions how many have really been incorporated. This is why we're leading up to the need for a working group that include these important submissions, because we got community engagement. You did, your consultants did. And isn't it wonderful to have that body of feedback? But one thing we reflect on, these consultants, McGregor Coxall, we were looking for images like this in the report, but we didn't see any. This is what they did when they redesigned Sydney Park, admittedly probably with a bigger budget, but the old brickworks at Tempe, that's where are those beautiful gabions? Where are those walkways? Where are the stepping stones and the beautiful recreation area and kiosk and lovely designed toilet facilities? Everything is really done first class. So we wondered about that. Why can't we do more? So we've come up with an idea for Creeklands concepts. Do you notice a GIS there? We'd like to work with your GIS expert. We've got a GIS expert who'll help us, who's resident here, who used to lecture in GIS at the university, Paul Frazier, who would be happy to work with us to come up with a plan like this one over here, that's from a town where I used to live with my wife in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the #1 recreation facility in America. And this is the process where they build up a GIS layer, a picture of constraints, of roads, of houses, of wetlands, of treatment ponds, etc. We'd like to do this to get a vision happening that incorporates all these things. But we do have another thing that's not perhaps pie in the sky, and that is our proof of concept billabongs, which has been funded by Viv May, and it came after he had a walk with us. So we've got a meeting next week about that. Here behind Neram, they're the ponds that have already been done by a lot of collective energies and groups, and we're working with those again to expand that concept.
Jim.
So here we have behind the keeping place, we see a lot of opportunity there for more billabongs and to recycle water using solar power.
Jim, could I ask you to wrap up now, please? You're a bit over time. Could you?
I'm sorry?
Could you wrap up?
Yes, I will. So, our invite to councillors is we'd like to take you on another bus trip, if you'd like. And we appreciate what's been done, what's been recommended already. We appreciate the mayoral minute of January to establish a working group. And this is our final slide, our suggestions to you, that we would like your endorsement of our Black Gully Billabongs project, which has been provided by Viv May. And we would like council to endorse the mayoral minute to create a community committee, possibly a section 355 committee, and that this committee then be charged with doing these things which were recommended in the master plan. And finally, we would commend the idea of the Mayor being the ex officio chair of the committee. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Scott, for your exciting presentation. As you know, last month we did adopt the Merrill Minute and that includes creating the working group that you refer to. And we're also seeking funds, and I've approached Adam Marshall for funds to revisit the ARM 2004 report to look at things like soil contamination and an updated management plans. But thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing to work with your group. And I have to say, yesterday I went along the creeklands with River Care, and I had their perspective, and they're doing some wonderful work, as you say. So thank you very much again. The second presentation today is from Jessica Smith and Agasan Salim. They're the New England Settlement Coordinator and Northern River Services and a ZD team member. So you are Jessica? Yeah, Jessica, welcome. You've got 15 minutes, Jessica. Thank you.
Family emergency, but I will be giving the presentation. So my name is Jess, and I am the Settlement Coordinator for the New England area for the Northern Settlement Services. I just wanted to start with a little bit about myself. I'm an Armidale local. I have an undergraduate degree majoring in anthropology and a couple of postgraduate degrees, one in community development and humanitarian assistance and another in public health. And I've worked with the Yazidi community since 2018, since they arrived. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of who Northern Settlement Services is. We're an entirely independent, not-for-profit organisation, and we provide a range of services in areas of settlement, aged care, youth and to vulnerable families across Hunter, Central Coast and New England. We've been in Armidale for over 15 years. And we are the settlement, engagement and transition support provider for the New England area, what we call SETS. Our activities with the community include casework coordination, developing programs, group work. We do a lot of consultation and information education sessions with the community, service coordination, so a lot of working with different services who work with the Yazidi community to work on projects that are needed, and event planning as well. So I mentioned about the SETS. So there's two components of SETS that we work with for the Yazidi community. Client services. I have just put up the description from the Home Affairs site here for you on what exactly client services and community capacity building services are that we provide under the SETS program. But essentially, the client services is casework support, information sessions, education. Our community capacity building is looking more at consultations and advocacy for the Yazidi community. A lot of you may have heard of Settlement Services International, and we work quite closely with Settlement Services International, and SSI probably had more of a spotlight when the refugee community first arrived in Armidale, because they are the organisation that works with a refugee community when they first arrive. So they work under the Humanitarian Settlement Program, or the HSP program, and that marries or works alongside the SETS program. So the SETS program is designed to fill the gaps of the HSP program essentially. But one of the important things to note is that when the Yazidi community comes, or when the refugee communities come to Armidale, they work with SSI for a very small amount of time. So they only work with SSI for 18 months maximum. And in that time, they're provided intensive supports and intensive services. After that, they are referred across to us, to the SETS program, and we work with them for 5 years. So we have them for a lot longer than SSI does, and we obviously provide more services around them settling in Australia long term, not just their basic needs when they first arrive. Currently, we have 50-50 in terms of the community. So we are sitting on the same number of community members as SSI. Underpinning all of our work is Armidale Sanctuary, who is a volunteer service, and they do a lot of in-home care for us and work with the community on a real ground level. So while we're doing a lot of the program development and a lot of work with the community, they're in the homes making sure that the community has some support. They do reading with different members in the community. They help them practice their English, all those small basic things that we just don't have time for. I wanted, before I move on to some of the programs that we run as NSS and some of the things that we want to do in the next year, I wanted to address some of the myths and facts that we have had around the Yazidi community. I think it's really important to understand these so that you understand the context of some of the programs that we design. So the first myth is that members of the Yazidi community are still refugees. In fact, they're permanent residents of Australia. They no longer have the status of refugees, and we refer to them as newly arrived. The second myth is transport is an issue locally for the Yazidi community. This is not actually true. A lot of them have cars, a lot of them have licenses, and they're actually very well equipped to be able to get around locally. We do have a number of issues relating to transport, however, in terms of specialist health travel outside of Armidale. But also at the moment we are finding that a lot of people aren't able to get their licence because there is no interpreter at Service New South Wales. And when they do get their licence, there is often a lack of support, particularly around women, being able to get enough hours up to get their licence. The next myth that we have is that Yazidis are Muslims. We get asked this a lot. Yazidis are not Muslims. Yazidis come from a Muslim country, but they themselves are not Muslims. Yazidism is a really ancient, really old spiritual religion. We also get asked a lot that whether the Yazidis receive a payment package when they arrive in Australia, and that's not the case. They receive Centrelink, the same as other community members. And we have also been told or asked a lot whether the Yazidis do not speak Arabic because it is traumatising, but that's not always the case. A lot of community members speak Arabic, but what we do is ask them what language they want to speak, and they tell us. So, current and future programs of NSS. Our current programs, we have a homework centre which is run out of Drummond Primary School. So primary school kids can go there after school to work on their English, work on their numeracy and literacy skills, and work on any homework that they have. And it is for children from multicultural backgrounds. We also have what we call the TVH program, or the Temporary Visa Holder program, and that works with people who are on their temporary visas, because we're finding that, especially with COVID and with what is happening globally, there are a lot of issues that temporary visa holders are experiencing, and not a lot of service to address them. So we applied for some funding and we were successful, and so we have a small period of time in which we can provide temporary visa holders with some support. We also have our REAP program, but I'll talk about that in a second. Future programs, in the next few months we're going to get a digital literacy person who will run the digital literacy program. This was part of Sanctuary's goal to address some of the digital literacy issues in the community, and they asked us to run the program, so we work with them on that. We also have a youth exchange program that we're starting in the next few months, where youth from the multicultural communities here will travel to Newcastle or the Hunter and vice versa. We're working on a number of women's initiatives, and we'll obviously continue our community development, information sessions and education. Our Regional Employment Agriculture program is one of the most important programs that we're running at this moment. So it's a partnership between us and Rotary of Armidale. We also work alongside Rural Biz, TAFE, Job Actives, local farmers and Sanctuary. It's an agriculture employment initiative for employment and enterprise. There's two components to it. We offer them formal training through Rural Biz and on-farm experience. We are very lucky that 2 Rotary members have actually donated some of their land to us to use for this program. And then we also have an opportunity for a hands-on horticulture program on the properties, so community members can go out and work on the lands in their own way. They can grow produce that they want to grow. They can start their own enterprises. We have just completed the pilot program for our training, and it was successful. And we actually have a presentation on the 8th of March that we're going to present awards to the people who completed that training and who were part of the program. So I just have a few pictures here. These are the guys doing some fencing with Rural Biz. They completed this incredibly quickly, a lot more quickly than we thought, and they were quite excited to do this as well. And you can see here, SBS actually came down and did a story on the REAP program with us, and this is just some behind the scenes footage. The guy on the left is Ant from Rural Biz, and he does the training for us. In terms of practical needs for REAP, obviously we need funding. NSS put in grants when this project first started that were declined, and so they have seed funded this themselves because they're very passionate about it. But for more in-kind support, we are at the moment looking at trying to get the members of the REAP program on the land on the 15th of March. So we need, some practical things such as portaloos and extra equipment that we are looking into trying to get at the moment. I guess one of the things that I really wanted to address and to point out is that the Yazidi community, the refugee community, has a lot of complex needs, and they will have ongoing needs for high-level support. Settlement support, so NSS, is only a 5-year support service for each client. We're coming up to a lot of the clients being here for 3 years now. So we're looking at in the next 2 years, they're going to be exiting out of our settlement programs, and they're going to be becoming part of the general population. They are part of the general population now, but they have our support services. So what I wanted to make clear is that there is going to be a real change in the next 2 years for that community, but a real change in the general community as well. And I think for the council, it's important to understand that a lot of services in town are going to need support and advocacy so that will attract funding to service the needs of these community. Because at the moment that's what we're doing, but when this 5 years is up, that is no longer going to be occurring in the same way that it is now. And acknowledging the fact for the need of bilingual supports. So that is a really big barrier for a lot of the community. Although the community go to AM&P at TAFE and do English, there are pockets of the community that still don't have access or are unable to attend those classes. But a lot of the times, even if they do attend AM&P, there isn't much chance of them to practice their conversational English and to improve their everyday English around that as well. So I just wanted to make that really clear and really obvious to everyone that that is what is going to be coming in the future, and it's something that we are aware of, and it's something that we are working with the community, and a lot of the programs that I've spoken about are ways for us to try and address some of this and to try and build capacity in the community so that they are able to integrate and to function within the Armidale community. But their trauma, their complexity, their high needs are going to mean that this community is going to need support, and a high level of support for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for an excellent presentation. Keep up the great work. We now move to public forum Have Your Say. The first speaker today is Mr. Jim Belshaw, He's speaking in relation to item 8.4, the future of UNE Heritage Centre and Regional Archives. Mr Belshaw.
I was thinking what a long time it is since I last addressed council. It was 1994 and I was chair of Tourism Armidale. So thank you for the opportunity to address you in support of the mayoral minute. I'll keep my remarks short, but I'm happy to answer any questions if that is appropriate. I don't think it is now, but for members of council, if you have questions about our work, contact me. The Heritage Centre Special Purpose Group was formed by the Armidale and District Historical Society and the Armidale Family History Group in October last year because of fears about the future of the UNE Heritage Centre and Regional Archives. Since our formation, UNE has confirmed and reconfirmed its commitment to the centre, most recently a week or so back when I met with the Dixon librarian Blanca Bizzani, who as librarian is formally in charge of the centre. Before going on, I want to thank UNE and its staff, including Bryn Griffiths, Associate Director Communication and Events, and especially Blanca, for their willingness to communicate. Inevitably, there will be differences in perspective. UNE has to deal with a changing competitive environment with the need for new directions. As part of this process, the VC has restated the need for community and regional involvement. This is still being defined. We have a somewhat narrow focus. Our core members are UNE alumni. We care for our university, but we have also worked for Northern Development, for the promotion of and research into the history and culture of Northern New South Wales for many, many years. As a rough indicator of this, I think that our members have more than 200 years collective experience working with the Heritage Centre and its collections, with local groups across Northern New South Wales, with writing on Northern history, culture and development. And I'm accompanied today by John Atchison, who is an example of the work, who's worked with multiple Armidale groups, worked at the university, and is presently mapping with the group mapping the boundaries of pastoral properties in 1848. Checks the time. Once we achieved confirmation from UNE about the continuation of the centre, our focus shifted. First, we are probably the closest thing that UNE has to an expert user group. Part of our role is to represent user interests to UNE. This covers things like access and communications. To illustrate, we've recently raised issues in regard to access in the centre during COVID. We've also moved to seek access by people who do not have access to computers, do not have internet, and who are presently limited in their access for that reason. Secondly, and more importantly, we are focused on longer-term directions to the centre. What should it look like in 10 years' time? How do we maximise the benefits to UNE and the broader community? There are some complex issues here that we do not have clear thoughts on. We've been doing some costing on different issues. We've talked to UNE, but they're not easy questions. From our viewpoint, there are three key points in the mayoral minute. The first is the general affirmation of the centre's importance. The more this is recognised, the better our chance of attracting resources and support for preserving and building the centre. One of the things that's key for many of our members is simply certainty and security. We've all been through so many changes at UNE that it leaves a residue behind. The second point is council's willingness to approach other councils in Northern New South Wales to seek their support for the centre. This needs to be phrased in terms of the benefits to those councils and their residents. The third is maximisation of the economic and cultural benefits offered by the centre. At present, this is difficult to quantify because we haven't focused on the benefits. We do know that the Heritage Centre brings hundreds of visitors to Armidale each year. We do know that the role of the Heritage Centre in supporting other museums and historical societies brings local economic and cultural benefits.
Jim, could
But we can't.
could you wrap up, please?
Yep, I'm wrapping up. We need to identify ways of maximising benefits. Should Council endorse the Merrill Minute, then much of the hard work lies ahead in implementing the steps, but it's a start. I commend the minute to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I can tell you and the people here that on Monday I raised this matter at the New England Joint Organisation, and the General Managers Group of that organisation have taken on board the need to research this and come up with some support. So we're broadening the net. The next speaker is Maria Hitchcock, and she's speaking to item 8.1, the Sustainable Somers Homestead Tourism Project. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor, councillors, General Manager and staff. Somers Station, owned by Colonel Henry Demerick, was the last stopping point to get supplies for settlers moving north beyond the boundaries. It had a well-supplied store selling tools, clothing and basic food. Together with his brother Captain William Demerick, they were responsible for the earliest European settlement of land on the tablelands near the later established town of Armidale, which was built on land resumed from the Somers holding, which extended from Uralla to north of Mount Duval and including the Rocky River goldfields. The second owner, Henry Arding Thomas, acquired the station in 1856, and 8 years later he sold it to the White family. The new owner built the now historic homestead between 1888 and 1906. It was designed by the Maitland architect J.W. Pender and built in the Federation Edwardian style using Armidale blue bricks. Somers became a large and comfortable country family house, a witness to the wealth of big landholders and the flourishing sheep industry at the turn of the century. Members of the White family occupied it until 1981, a long time. A few years later, the property was transferred to the National Trust. As well as some extensive heritage gardens put in by Mary White, it now boasts the Australian Garden History Society's significant heritage rose garden, incorporating the many heritage roses collected by the late Catherine McLean. These gardens are maintained by member volunteers. In the Somers Homestead Conservation and Management Plan 1987, Davies, Levens and Mackay state, Somers Homestead's historical significance is founded on the work of 3 families who together have exercised an outstanding influence on the development of New England and particularly Armidale, namely the Demerick, Thomas and White families. The collection of working outbuildings and historical archaeological sites, which together with the house and contents reflect the creation and subsequent evolution of a successful pastoral property and the lives of the people who lived and worked on it. Somers Homestead demonstrates the diverse cultural, social, economic and occupational attitudes of rural communities from the mid-19th to the late 20th centuries. In recent years, Somers Homestead has become a well-known local tourist attraction, but it was only ever open to day visitors. The former manager, Les Davis, OAM, had big plans to extend tourism opportunities and advocated for a major development of the site. He was rewarded in 2018 with the New South Wales Regional Growth, Environment and Tourism Fund grant of $1.77 million. ARC offered to contribute $730,000 and the National Trust $200,000, making a total of $2.7 million. The new Development includes 10 heritage-style cabins built on site, which will sleep up to 45 guests behind the existing farm buildings, as well as an additional accommodation space built near the old coach house. Visitors will also be able to enjoy local produce in a newly renovated restaurant, which will be doubled in size to seat over 90 people. The changes are expected to attract up to 185 visitors a day to Somera's homestead, tripling the current yearly visitation from 10,000 to 30,000 people a year, provide 16 new jobs and inject an additional $6.5 million tourist dollars into the Armidale region. The National Trust has assured us in a recent letter that the development should be completed by the end of 2021, that's this year. However, a major impediment to any growth in tourism remains the access road to the homestead, which is a gravel road with narrow grids that does not allow large buses, trucks or caravans to visit the site. New England Vision's 2030 Institute organised a petition held over 3 weeks this month to gauge public sentiment for the project. This is the petition. I present the 331 signatures and comments to Council as evidence of public support. We will be publishing a more detailed report next week. NEV 2030 calls on ARC to make Somera's Road a priority, develop a design and apply for funding from various sources. Tourism brings valuable dollars into the local area, which has a flow-on effect through accommodation, hospitality, retail and more. There has never been a better time to examine ways...
I have to ask you to wrap up, please, Maria. See, me.
Can I keep going?
No, you're over time.
Okay.
No, just wrap up.
Wrap
Couple
up?
of sentences, yep.
Yep. There's never been a better time to examine ways of building revenue and planning for the future development of our major tourist attractions. We thank Council for their contribution to date, but the job is not yet completed and we are ready to offer our support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Our next speaker is Mr. Richardson. I understand he's speaking twice, but he's speaking on behalf of somebody else who can't be here.
Yeah, on the second item I am.
Thank you. Okay, but
Quite right.
I'm allowing you to contravene our rules just this once.
Oh, I wouldn't want to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, Mr. General Manager, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. So I'm speaking on 12.7 now, aren't I? Yeah, thank you. I clearly remember sometime in the early 1990s when the Friends of the Northern Railway, FONR, their abbreviation, put enough pressure on state government to have our train service return to Armidale, where the XPT had previously terminated in Tamworth. At that stage, we hadn't had a train service for 3.5 years, and it was thought to be lost forever. Thanks to FONR, the service was returned in November 1993. This is the only time in the state's history that a scheduled passenger service has ever been reinstated after being completely withdrawn. I sound very knowledgeable, but I talked to Matthew Tierney this afternoon. In 2003, the then state government, with Michael Costa as Minister for Transport, again had its eyes on reducing our train service back to Tamworth. FONR again strapped its armour back on, got thousands of incensed citizens to rally at the Armidale railway station, and with the help of the then state member, Richard Torbay, Costa's plan was squashed. In the late 90s, another group of rail enthusiasts, the New England Rail Group, again working with our state member Richard Torbay, secured funding to build a replacement bridge over a rail cutting 20 kilometres out from Armidale on the Burlong Road. Because of perceived cost, the state government was going to fill this in rather than build a bridge, which would stop any prospect of trains going north beyond this point. The people who are members of both these groups are passionately in support of train services to Armidale and beyond, and it's only been since 1990 that we have regrettably we haven't had rail services beyond Armidale. We owe these groups and everyone involved in creating and maintaining rail services a large debt of gratitude. The Great Northern Rail corridor must be kept open at all costs. This doesn't mean that the rail trail enthusiasts can't use the corridor for their purposes. However, they seem to want more than that, which would be to have the Transport Administration Act amended so the corridor has its protection stripped from it. This probably won't worry the state government, as it could relinquish responsibility of the Great Northern Rail corridor. However, it will become the responsibility of respective councils that the corridor runs through. Why would council want this responsibility? Once that Transport Administration Act is amended, the land can be sold and the corridor would be gone for good. Finally, what about our children and our children's children and generations into the future? Don't you think we should leave future decisions to them on the Great Northern Railway? We want to get more cars and trucks off the roads, and rail has the capacity to move huge amounts of freight and significant numbers of people with a much lower carbon footprint. The rest of the world seems to realise this. I also believe that there are already solar-powered trains, and these will become technically better into the future. Please, in making your decision today to take this rail proposal to another potential rail funding level, consider all the implications into the future. In this case, rail and bikes can coexist, but only if the legal status of the line is not tampered with, and I'm not at all confident that that won't happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I invite you to return to the microphone and speak against item 13.8, Mr. Richardson, the Drought Management Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to apologise that ARA didn't put in a submission for the draft Drought Management Plan, which I will call the DMP from now on. We now realise that this was presented to ARC from consultants GDH on 9 December 2020 and went on public display until 21 January this year. We missed the notification for this partly because we had assumed, as participants at the workshop on 27 October last year in Armidale and Guyra, that we would be personally notified of this. Should never assume. We did, however, provide written feedback to the consultants on the initial draft of the Drought Management Plan. In this, we stated that even though the consumption targets need to fall at each level, the trigger points to go from one level to another are too high and need to be reduced. Our recommendation for our preferred trigger points is highlighted on page 2 of our feedback to GDH, which I say I've distributed to you, which I haven't yet, but I will in a minute. When we presented this feedback to the consultants, the reply I had on November 10, and I quote, was, "Thanks for your responses, Rob. I appreciate the effort you have gone to in getting responses from the executive. I have passed them on to the council officers that were present at the workshop for their consideration on how to incorporate into the draft plan, with all the other feedback received before it goes on public exhibition. Naturally, we are disappointed that despite our feedback, the end result was essentially the recommendation from the Armidale October workshop. Even though I participated in this workshop, which overall was very good, it was quite rushed towards the end and there was little time for really considered consideration for the consultants to take away. I left the workshop concerned that the hurried recommendations were too strict. From memory, the starting point the consultants had on levels and triggers were lower than what we've ended up with here on your agenda. We must have been the only group who thought that the triggers were too high for each level, as obviously our feedback was not considered by council officers to be reflective of the overall feedback, which is disappointing. I understand why people are hypersensitive to our water needs following the 2019 drought, the worst in recorded history. However, even with the triggers that we suggested, we still have put a heightened emphasis on water security, and our figures are much more conservative than the Armidale-Jumeirah 2005 or the 2016 previous drought management plans. Most businesses and all residents were really put to the test with the over-prescriptive restrictions imposed by ARC management without council involvement in around May 2019. For residents, there was the destruction of many trees and plants in their garden. I heard a story of an elderly lady who told a friend that her garden was all that she had left to live for. The emotional and financial cost of losing established gardens was high, and the physical toll it took on many people lugging 10-litre buckets of grey water month after month to try and keep their gardens alive was and remains significant. Ironically, the award we're all given for our diligence in saving water is to have our water rate substantially increased due to a decline in Council's water revenue. In our feedback, we also requested that our significant parks be given higher priority. Possibly Council thought by not keeping adequate watering up to the parks, they were demonstrating they were doing as they were telling residents to do. These parks are public property and a sanctuary for people, for when people may have become depressed in watching their own gardens perish. Not to mention that our parks and gardens present an enormous image, important image for Armidale-Gyra and our region. We also recommended, where possible, I'm going to miss that because I'm going to run out of time. With regard to our feedback to GDH and ARC, we believe that the restrictions for the Elm Street tomato factory are too lenient. We fully concede that tomato factories are great employers. However, the approvals for everything after stage 2 of Elm Street were considered on the basis of totally inadequate water supply and possibly former Gyra Shire councillors hoping that there would be endless good seasons. This wasn't good planning. With further regard to today's report, we're concerned because we can't find the complete information on the draft drought management plan in the report in today's agenda, and the attachments aren't on the ARC website. If the full details of the drought management plan aren't available for you to see, how can you possibly make an informed decision? If you can see something that we can't, which should be in the public domain, this has to be questioned. Finally, can we request that you give this item very careful consideration before making your decision today, as there is still a lot of anger out there after 2019 from the lack of consultation about the water restrictions and the total absence of a drought management plan of any description. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Final speaker is Mr. Lenehan, again speaking against item 12.7. Mr. Lenehan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to be here, and thank you, councillors and staff. I feel I must apologise in my first instance. I was rather late arriving, and as a result of that, my speech might sound a little bit disjointed because I didn't get time to get the address formally drawn up. But bear with me, and I'm willing to answer any questions if anyone has any. There was a rather huge storm west of Gyra this afternoon, and that's what's delayed me. But it's great to see the rain, and I notice we have a leak in the chambers here, but it's dripping a bit over there. But, anyway, I'll get on with it. Thank you. As most of you probably know, I've done these addresses before, and over the 6-year period since New England Rail Trail Group first formed, there's been no real change at this stage, except for the fact that some fanciful feasibility studies and business case studies have been put forward, and council is looking at them. What I'd like to point out is that there's still very, very significant and dominant opposition to the closure of the Great Northern Line between Armidale and Glen Innes for the construction of a cycleway. Much more than many councillors probably would believe. I have several petitions that are getting quite old now, but they can be drawn out if anyone would like to see them, with several thousand signatories wishing to see the Great Northern Line remain open and there for future use, if need be, for a rail facility. It's my belief that there should be some sort of formal mandate put before the ratepayers and communities to determine whether both state and federal government go ahead with legislation to close the line. I do notice, since I read the notes on this item, that Cleanliness Council have already applied for funding to do a section to their south, to Ben Lomond, I believe. And they've applied for funding via the Bushfire Local Emergency Fund. I find that rather dismaying, actually, and I just wonder where they're coming from there. And I have contacted Adam Marshall as recently as 2 days ago on this, and he has no idea hasn't heard of any application for funding from Cleanliness at this stage, knows nothing about it, and said he still has not heard anything from either council regarding a proposal to build a rail trail north of Armidale or to close the line, and that's been the case for 5 years. Getting to the business case study carried out by Radani, it's before council, I believe. I do struggle with how they've arrived at some of their figuring. They state that there's going to be 15,000 visiting users and 14,000 local users. I'm just wondering where they draw these figures from. 14,000 local users. I live on a road out of Guyra where I know there's a dozen very enthusiastic cyclists that use that road. I'm quite happy to see them on it, and I know they're all members of the New England Rail Trail group. And a few from Armidale. There's going to be some rather sore derrieres around the area, I think, if they're going to run it at 14,000 times in a 12-month period. Look, I'm terribly sorry about that. I did have it silenced, but anyways. Yeah, so one wonders, you know, about anyone can draw up a business case study, and it was done by Radani, of course, as I said before, and which is a government-based local and local northern area body, and I do wonder about the whole business case studies validity.
I need you to wrap up, Mr. Lenihan, please.
I'll just wind it up. The reason I'm here, obviously, is to ask council to consider to at least at this stage not apply for application for funding at this stage. I feel that there's far more better things for council to be doing and applying funding for than a spurious proposal for a tourism item such as this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lenihan. Item 7, confirmation of minutes. I'll take a motion to adopt the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting 27th of January, subject to Resolution 28/21 being amended by removal of Part B, which is in a direct negative to Part A. Is there a mover? Councillor Robinson, seconded Councillor Morat, to adopt the minutes with that amendment. Is there any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Minutes of the extraordinary council meeting on the 10th of February. The mover to adopt, please. Councillor Morat. Seconder. Councillor. It's not seconded. Councillor. Thank you, councillors. It's seconded. All those, any opposition? All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. The mayoral minutes. The first is the sustainable summaries.
Please, that we consider 8.1, 8.4, 12.7 and 13.8 immediately after the confirmation of the minutes. If I can get a seconder.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
It was items 8.1, 8.4, 12.7 and 13.8. The items for which people have had their say, so that we can deal with the items immediately after they have the say.
It's a procedural motion, so I'll put it. Those in favour? Those against?
8.1, 8.4, 12.7 and 13.8, unless I'm mistaken about the numbers.
I should say, councillors, that this destroys the calling of the business paper by picking and choosing what you want to do. Okay, and I must confess I'm not happy. But anyway, let's proceed. The motion was carried. So in relation to 8.1, I move the recommendation on page 5. Any speakers?
Could I just suggest a very minor change for 8.1, because I thought it was a little bit confusing. And basically that was simply that it notes council's commitment to a road access.
Council instead of its.
Yeah, well, it's just that otherwise it doesn't stand independently.
As you wish. Right.
Council's take out
Thank
of
you.
that as well.
Thank you, that's acceptable. I'd like to just add advice that's been given to me by staff, and that is that there is a revised business plan which contains timeframes for delivery, including a September 21 build of the internal road. So I think that's pretty important to note. Is there opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Item 8.2, I can't deal with that because of what you've just moved. So what's the next one? 8.4. No, you wanted to do it this way. 8.4, the future of the UNE Heritage Centre. I move the recommendation as Mayor. Is there any opposition? No? No opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. What's the next one? Yeah. Rail, what number is that, thanks? 12.7, the rail trail.
I'll move the adoption, please. I'll move the adoption of the 12.7 recommendation.
It's been moved. One moment, please, councillors. There's a motion to adopt the recommendation. What page are we on, please? 63, thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? It's seconded by Councillor Gallatley. I'm hearing there's an amendment.
I move an amendment that council note the submission or the intention to submit a funding application for the federal government's Building Better Regions Fund round 5, but notes that the criteria for such an application cannot be met, and requests council staff to seek funding to pursue a study on the development of a use rail corridor for corridor activation for the main North Line. No, I don't. I'm making it up as I go along. No, I'm not making up. Sorry, that was a facetious comment which I withdraw. I'll say that council notes the intention of staff to submit a funding application, etc., to round 5.
Your amendment is printed plus you're adding some words.
Yeah,
could you repeat them,
and the
please?
added words, but notes that the formal criteria for that application cannot be met and requests the General Manager to pursue a funding application for a study to develop a multi-use rail corridor activation project for the main North Line. I can go on all that part within our LGA because we don't have jurisdiction of the whole of it.
First of all, I presume Is that acceptable to the mover? Not acceptable to the seconder? Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Speaking to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is a very divisive issue in our community. There just hasn't been any proper consultation process with the communities that will be affected by the rail trail proposal as it's currently noted in this very, very brief officer's report. I've only got 5 minutes, so I will just state that having even had the most cursory look at the criteria for the Building Better Regions Fund Round 5, one of the key criteria is that the applicant, which in this case would be ARC, can confirm that the applicant has the authority of the land or infrastructure project owner to undertake the project at the nominated site. I mean, frankly, the Northern Rail Corridor, or the main North Line as it's known by rail aficionados, or the Great Northern Rail if you're a public person, that's not owned by ARC. That is owned by the New South Wales Government, and it is under the protection of the Transport Administration Act. It would require an Act of Parliament for this council to get any kind of authority to conduct any kind of project on it. That has not happened, and in fact I was in contact with Mr David Harris, MLA, who is the Shadow Minister for Regional Transport, and he confirmed to me this afternoon, in fact, that the state government has passed a Transport Administration Act amendment in relation to the Murwillumbah rail trail project, and they have adopted a wait-and-see approach to that Murwillumbah to Casino rail trail project or rail trail amendment to the Transport Administration Act, because they themselves are not sure that this is going to be a success. Secondly, Mr Harris informed me that as far as the New South Wales opposition is concerned, on the table at the moment is a idea or a concept or a policy, a draft policy to support a multi-use rail corridor activation study for this railway, this main North Line. Now, the current status of that is that it's in debate as a policy coming up to the next election. It cannot be absolutely made certain until it's been run through the Parliamentary Budget Office estimates process, and that can't happen until 8 months before the 2023 election in March 2023. Nevertheless, what Mr Harris did do is draw my attention to the fact that, and I've circulated all councillors with an email to this effect this afternoon, is that the Byron Bay Council in 2019 received a report on multi-use activation, which is becoming a very popular alternative to simply ripping up rails, closing a railway line by means of amendment to the Transport Administration Act. Both overseas, in New Zealand, in the United States, in other places, it's seen that the maximum benefit, economic and social, and in enhancing a visitor economy, is to activate the entire corridor by means of allowing some form of rail tourism or passenger service, or the two combined, plus a rail trail for cyclists and walkers. It's a question of actually optimising the infrastructure opportunity that you have. My seconder, Councillor O'Brien, is going to talk about a National Farmers Federation move in order to activate rail in a different context. But all of this points to the fact that we're in a completely new climate in regards to a sort of rip up the rails bicycle trail proposal, which is what this is at this stage. I have never been opposed to enhancing cycling tourism and cycling recreational opportunities for our residents. But the fact is, this is such a main line, it's actually called the Main North Rail, it's not a stub line, that it should be seen to respect the rights not just of this generation, not just of all the community members, but of future generations and of past generations that toiled and sweat and poured their lives out building this line for the benefit of the future. So the other issues, we just don't comply at the moment. The criteria 2.1.1, this has got to be an investment-ready project. The authority of the landholder must be obtained, as I've said before, there must be identified and prepared submissions for all required regulatory and/or development approvals. We need a new Act of Parliament to do this, and we don't have that. And the project details, finalised project designs and costings must be done, and it's got to be shovel ready within 12 weeks of the acceptance of the fund. I mean, it's a lovely sort of symbolic act, but it has no likelihood of success. And for this reason, I think our best option is to actually pursue a study that is a sound study that would go alongside proper community consultation for multi-use, as Byron Shire has already done, and we have a wonderful precedent within our own northern region.
Thank you, Councillor. The minutes should note that Councillor Robinson left the meeting room for the duration of the discussion on this matter. And the seconder to the amendment, Councillor O'Brien.
Yes, it's actually been a very big week in relation to regions. And I think what's happened this week is probably a big game changer in terms of how we think about regional development. Yesterday, the National Farmers Federation released their comprehensive new regionalisation policy, which was developed with the Business Council, the Council of Small Businesses, Regional Development Australia, and it is a whole game-changing new regionalisation agenda based on their conviction that we are now facing a 1 in 100-year opportunity to embrace the single biggest movement to the regions that we have ever seen. There's been nearly 12,000 people moved to the regions in the last year, and this is unheard of. The COVID work from home situation has showed employees and workplaces that they can move away from the city, that they can have their homes somewhere else, somewhere where it's cheaper, that the quality of life is an entirely different kind of quality of life than you would in crowded cities. The house prices in the regions have their increases are double that of the city increases presently. Alongside this, there's 40% growth in jobs in the regions. We realised during the coronavirus pandemic that we should not rely on other countries. We should be developing our own manufacturing, our own food development capacity and our own tourism. The regions, according to Fiona Simpson, the National Farmers Federation president, who's worked on this project, says, and I quote, "Right now, regions are ripe and poised to be the engine tool of the Australian economy." This roadwork to regionalisation is now a cabinet item for 2021. And a matrix is now being investigated for how we do this. Fiona, the president, said that the main thing is that they're looking at is that regions need to be livable. They need transport, they need connectivity. Infrastructure Australia, she says, should be funding and will be funding big ticket items, not just for a few years ahead, not for 1, 2 years ahead, but 10, 20, 30 years ahead. And they're already onto this. Transport is part of it. They're looking at the moment too of where the winners are. Where are the towns that are looking like they can take advantage of this? They've already named 3. Moree, that's in our state electorate, is already one of them, on the basis that it'll be near a railway line when the inland rail is built. Ms Simpson's, she said that it was crucial that the 3 tiers of government work together strategically to plan regional development. At the moment, government are picking those winners, as I've said, and they're looking for more. Right now, we should be thinking big. Times are changing. We could be one of those winners. If the government are now picking winners, this is the worst time in the world to show that we are now closing down lines for something small. We should be thinking big. Closing a line in a new environment is closing off crucial lifeline to our participation in this new regionalisation agenda, which is we're just on the edge of. We're at the beginning of. We're taking the first few steps. A bike track is great, fantastic, but it's a small thing. It's a very small thing. It's a tiny thing that's just thinking a few years ahead and just thinking of tourism. It's not thinking of, the bigger sense of tourism. It's not thinking of manufacturing in the future. It's not thinking of developing our regional food capacity. It's not thinking of the big move to the regional development project. So, no, this is the worst time in the world to think of ripping up a line. Let's be one of the winners. Let's not reject and pull up a line where we could be part and parcel of that connectivity to this new project. I implore you, have the rail trail, but don't rip up the line. Don't close the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the speaker against the amendment? Councillor Bailey.
How can we call it a main line when it hasn't been used for 32 years? How can we call it closing a line when it hasn't been used for 32 years? How can it be called a line when you can't carry stock on it? You can't carry, there's no heavy freight coming out of this region. The only likely thing would be Costas with tomatoes. They don't use rail anywhere in Australia because it's too unreliable and it's not point-to-point enough. So the only real people that can use it are passengers or tourists, as you both rightly said. Let me say that passengers, it was a huge success when it used to run to Tenterfield. It used to average 5 to 6 people a day from Armidale to Tenterfield. What an effective use of government resources. We're screaming at government to spend money on all sorts of things, and yet we're facing continual pressure all the time about the rail line. I think the success of what we are seeing down south in the Tumbarumba rail line has been huge. New businesses open, new cafes open, new B&Bs open, the caravan parks are filling up, and the motels are doing well. It's bringing new people to town and building recognition in the area. We are not a possible freight centre. We never will be because we don't have the freight capacity here. John Holland, as I have repeated now, I think this is the third or fourth time this council has debated the rail trail, have said they've done studies. There is not enough freight here. We're not a freight centre. So that's another significant problem that we face. I think the other point that we need to remember is that we're not being asked to invest in this. This next study is going to be funded by the New England Rail Trail. It has not been funded by council. They have put their own money in their pocket, their supporters' money, and they're going to match the Glen Innes money so that we're not being asked to invest in anything. And I think that's a significant show of strength that they are actually making the place work. We need new opportunities for Guyra. We need new opportunities for Armidale. And here's a great new opportunity, bringing people here for a rail trail that would last 110 kilometres, would bring people here who would come and stay, visit the university, go to the Gorge country, visit all the things that we want them to visit. We'd have a new attraction, not, and I don't believe that we're going to see in our lifetime any government reopen the rail line north. It is just not viable. The cost of rebuilding it, whether it be 200 million, whether it be 1.2 billion, because the cost variations are massive. Queensland government's shown no interest in broadening the line from Wallangarra north into Brisbane, because it's a different rail gauge system. So you've got some serious problems. So let's get on with it. We've dealt with this 3 times or a number of times. Let's defeat this amendment, support the motion and move forward. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers for the amendment? For the amendment? Okay. There can be no more speakers against, I don't think so. You've had your speak, Councillor? No, sorry. Okay. I propose to put the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment, raise your hands, please. 2, those against. 4, I declare the amendment lost. We revert to the original motion. Can I put the motion? You've spoken. You wish? Well, yes, in the interest of time saving. Thank you.
I actually believe that, that Councillor O'Brien and Councillor O'Connor were spot on with their comments, but I think they're coming from the wrong direction. I think we're looking at COVID, the regeneration of families getting together to be able to spend affordable days doing family things on the rail trail. As I said, everything that they said is correct. There are people coming here There's people that there's a skyrocketing. You can't buy a push bike hardly in Australia or a caravan because everyone is going and doing these sort of things now. This is what we want for this area, not just for tourism, but also for the people that are coming through to pull their bikes off the back of the cars with that are camping or caravanning and actually travelling on these. So I don't understand where they're going with the rail line, because I agree with Councillor Bailey. Trains are not going to come back here. Thank you.
Thank you. I propose to put the motion.
Oh, excuse me,
You've had
I'd
your
like to
speak.
speak against it, please.
No, you've had your speak.
No,
sorry.
only in relation to the amendment. This is the main...
You articulated your view by speaking
I don't
to the
agree,
amendment.
Mr Mayor, and I would...
You-
I have a document which I forgot to table, and I wish to table it.
You've spoken on the matter and you've clearly articulated your views.
This is a separate motion. That was
We
an
have
amendment.
one motion on the floor at a time. If you wish to move another motion, that'll be after this one's dealt with.
Mr Mayor, I object. I believe that I'm entitled to speak against the motion
Okay,
on
I'll
the floor
take
now.
advice. I'll take advice. I stand corrected. You're entitled to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the point... I have articulated part of my views, but of course 5 minutes isn't very long for me, but it was a self-deprecating comment, and I hope you all appreciate my capacity to do that. Look, the concern that I have about this is that we're really in new territory now, and it's to force through something that we actually don't even have the capacity to execute is going to, because, I mean, this report we've been given is very, with respect, somewhat flimsy, because I don't quite know what the application is going to be for, but nevertheless, the times have changed, as Councillor O'Brien said, and there's a lot of places who are looking at this multi-use, side-by-side, whatever you want to call it, but multi-use activation. And I'd like to table the press release and information. It's a document, but I undertake to send to Council the electronic version of this, which is the material and the study that Byron Bay Council have undertaken in relation to the multi-use activation project, which they are looking at undertaking. And I might add that it includes a lot of community consultation, which has not occurred in any way with this community. There are certain representations made by the New England Rail Trail Group, which, as Councillor Bailey correctly supports, is the main financial and policy, I suppose, proponent of this. But they certainly represent themselves, but not the whole community. And I think it's very damaging for this council, and is only going to exacerbate the lack of trust and other issues that we're facing at this very moment if we forge on with this without actually undertaking proper consultation with the whole of the affected community. But further than that, I think we face further very, very serious reputational damage outside the boundaries of the LGA if we make an application for a project that we simply don't qualify for. If we're trying to qualify for the tourism-related infrastructure project section of round 5 of the Building Better Regions application or funding round, section 2.1.2 of the criteria for that requires that council has to demonstrate how COVID-19 has affected our region's tourism industry. Well, the only thing that we can say in relation to that is that it's increased our revenues, because it's now a well-known and recognised fact, and in fact it's advertised on our TVs every night, that regional tourism has been a beneficiary, not a victim of COVID-19. As all the planes international holidays seem to have evaporated, regional tourism is growing, and it's I don't think that we would qualify for a COVID-19 sort of compensatory grant if you're going for the investment ready project, so construction project. We just don't qualify on that basis anyway. We haven't. Another requirement is that there are in existence finalised project designs and costings. We haven't done those. Of got no project design work done. We are not shovel ready. And we don't even own or have access to the land on which this project is supposed to be built. So that's a repeated point from previously. So look, I just think we are burying our heads in the sand. With respect to what Councillor Bailey has said, look, I really appreciate his enthusiasm for this. And as I said, I'm as enthusiastic as he is about nature tourism, about cycling tourism, about using the corridor. But I don't think that Armidale Regional Council needs to take its lead from Tumbarumba Shire Council. I think we can actually think a little bit bigger for our region, and that's what I want. And that's why I'm pressing with others out there in the community for a multi-use activation project rather than this rip up the lines sort of, you know, edition 1.0, if you like. Let's go to 1.2 or 1.3, where we can actually think about maximising the infrastructure that we have and jumping on board the national imperative that's now growing for big spending in relation to large infrastructure and connectivity projects. This council was addressed shortly after it was elected in 2018 by the then State Planner Gary White, who argued very strongly and cogently for the fact that we need to have a vision to linking ourselves with South East Queensland. We can't really do that without public transport over the border.
Your time is up, Councillor.
No
more. You've had 10 and a half
No, that's
minutes.
fine. I just want to table this report.
Thank you. It's tabled.
Thank you.
So you've spoken against the motion. We've had two speakers. Well, you spoke against the amendment. You spoke for the motion. I'm hoping we can put this to the vote. It's very clear where the vote lies. Are there any other speakers? Do you want to write a reply, Councillor? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, raise your hands. Those against, 2. It's carried 4 votes to 2. That's the recommendation as printed.
May I have my vote?
And Councillor O'Connor's requested that her vote be recorded against, and so has Councillor O'Brien. And could we bring Councillor Robinson back in, please? The minutes record her return, please. We now go, I think, to 13.8? 13.8 on page 85. 13.8 on page 85 as a consequence of that procedural motion. Looking for a mover. Councillor Gallatley's moving the officer's recommendation. Is it seconded? Seconded by Councillor Morat. Okay. Before we proceed to debate, I might ask the relevant council officer to briefly speak to the item. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. And I'd also acknowledge the author of the report in the room, Arun Gatum, who's spent a lot of his last year or so developing this. And I took the liberty of printing out the council report, the plan and the submissions, that little pack on your desk there. As the motion says, it is about the adoption of the proposed plan, and this replaces 2 drought management plans from Guyra and Armidale, and there was, as a couple of speakers have acknowledged, they should have been replaced probably in 2019 or 2020. We are required by the state government to have a drought management plan, so we are remiss at the moment in not having a drought management plan. There was a stakeholder and community engagement process towards the end of last year. There were stakeholder sessions in Armidale and Guyra, followed by an extended public consultation process for 42 days that ended in January. I think council staff would propose that this strikes a balance between restrictions, which are an impediment on the community and businesses, and balancing that with maintaining our water supplies. And I'm happy to take questions, and Arun has also said he's quite happy to stand up and take more technical questions.
Are there questions, Councillor? No? Is there a need? Is there a need for debate? You have a question? What are you saying to me?
Have a question?
You have a question. Would you like to ask your question,
Yeah,
please?
I would just like to ask a general question. Is there any explanation from council staff as to why Malpas Dam is still sitting, you know, well, we're now on 59%, less than 60%. And I acknowledge that at level 3, according to these, I just want to know if there's any more skilled response to the question why we are, after the rainfall we've had this year, why the dam's not filling quicker.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It is a difficult one, and it is concerning to us that we've had above average rainfall, and yet we haven't had the flows into the catchment, and they're falling fairly quickly now, and we're moving into a time of year where you can expect even less rainfall. We've come off the summer. We're at the tail end of La Nina. I can't give you answers. There's a lot of speculation why. That was, the soil capacity was down, the drought, it took a long time to reabsorb, but I think at the end of the day, it's probably just simply that you have seen a lot of rain around the area, but it has not fallen into that relatively small catchment above Guyra and above the Malpas Dam, but it's definitely troubling, and it probably lends weight a bit to what DPIE Water is and Public Works Advisory is pushing us towards, and that is considering climate change variability. So it seems to be bearing that out.
Thank you.
Unless Arun wants to provide more.
No. Are there further questions? Councillor Robinson?
No, I want to move an amendment.
No further questions. We have a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation. It's on the screen. Councillor Robinson, your amendment.
My amendment is that the adoption of the plan is deferred to allow time for clarification and consideration. If there's
I regard that as a direct negative. The motion's to adopt, your motion's to defer.
Well, how do I phrase that then? Is there any way I can phrase
Yes,
it as a deferral then?
I'm sorry, the General Manager concurs with me.
Well, I'll foreshadow a motion that if this plan is not accepted, then my motion will be a foreshadowed motion.
Yes, that's the way to go about it. Thank you. We have the motion on the screen to adopt. Is there a need for debate? Doesn't look like it.
I want to speak against it.
Is there a speaker for?
I'll speak for it. This is going to be pretty quick. There's a couple of things that I also believe that's going to play very well with adopting this drought management plan. When we look down into the domestic rainwater with the tanks and stuff like that, for people that this doesn't quite suit in the Armidale region, I'm very sure that they can adopt that if we can get this domestic rainwater policy a bit together too, with your installation of water tanks and stuff. That will get them through for their gardens and whatever other extra stuff they want to do. I know that my wife and myself have been doing it from this last year, grabbed the tank straight off, and it is a bloody handy thing for your veggie garden, whatever you like. So I can't see this policy here. He's put a lot of work into it, and I think it's a no-brainer for us to take it. And it isn't as if, well, it's kicks the other one that we'd never really had anyway so long ago. So I think it's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You go.
Okay, there's a seconder wish to speak
Yeah.
to the motion? No. Speaker against?
Okay, I'll speak against. And the reason I want
Councillor
to
Robinson?
speak against is that this plan certainly has some very interesting information, but it could be much better planned with a bit of work to clarify meanings and allow everyone to get on top of the details. I was puzzled, for example, by page 18, which says that ARC is working with DPI Water and New South Wales Public Works to develop a strategy to secure water for the region. And then immediately afterwards, we have table 4, which is said to show how supply actions are implemented as restrictions are increased. But it doesn't seem to be any previous policy I've ever heard of, and it certainly isn't any current policy because it talks about carting water to Gaia and doesn't even mention the pipeline. So what on earth is this table? And even stranger is page 29, which says, water restrictions have never been applied in Armadale water supply scheme since Malpas Dam was built. However, the dam storage went down to 5,000 megalitres, 38% of the then capacity in May 1981. And the recorded lowest level it went down to 57% more recently in January 2015, as shown in Fig 5. But then we have Fig 5, which shows the really, really low levels in January 2020. So what I see when I read this document is an out-of-date document that somebody has tried to update in a hurry. And many of the graphs of information stop at 2015-16, although Fig 5 is an exception. And we also heard from Rob Richardson that the public consultation failed because many people who wanted to make submissions didn't even know it was happening. So I think that if we adopt it with manifest errors, it will reflect badly on councillors. We have to have a correct working document to adopt, and this isn't the correct working document. It might only take, a few hours or a little while to update it, but we have to have the correct document before we can update it. And yes, okay, it's true that we don't have a formal policy, and that's a bit of a problem. But if we have, and then we have to have a formal policy, but let's make it a correct policy, because otherwise it'll look badly on council. And that's the last thing we want. So please consider my foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a speaker for the motion? Speaker against? Councillor O'Connor?
Look, this has been so long in coming, and I really do appreciate the work that's gone into it. But I have to support Councillor Robinson's views. This surely should have been the subject of a councillor workshop. It would have been even better to have had it post-suspension or now in the reinstated period, because all councillor workshops are going to be public. And I think the public have an incredibly vested interest in this document, as we're still struggling, in fact, with level 3 restrictions, where the trigger in this, I believe, would actually have us on level 2, I think. But nevertheless, there just hasn't been enough time for this to be debated, and I think it's been presented because obviously we need to have this policy, but we're the governing body. We've been only just really returned to office. We haven't been offered the opportunity to peruse this and discuss it with staff as a governing body. And I think, 5 minutes each way on a public debate of this nature is not nearly enough. And I'm very disturbed by the concerns that were raised by the representative from the Armadale Regional Ratepayers Association about their lack of knowledge of it being put up for public exposure as a draft. So I will be supporting, if I can, Councillor Robinson's suggestion of a deferral. I don't like deferring things, but I think in this case it's so important. We've been waiting so long for it, and it's been unrealistic to just plonk it on this agenda with 3 working days' notice and expect us to vote on it.
Thank you. There's been 2 speakers against and no speakers for. Do you need a right of reply? Okay, I propose to put the motion on your screen that Council adopt. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried 4 votes to 3. We now move back to...
Can I have my dissent noted, please?
And please.
The councillors Robinson, O'Connor and O'Brien requested that their votes be recorded as being against the resolution. We revert now to the agenda, and I think we might be on 8.2, page 7, the mayoral minute, freedom of the City of Armadale well, it should be all Guyra town. I move the recommendation. Is there a need for debate? No. Councillor O'Connor?
Oh, I've just got a question. What does it deliver?
Beg your
Is it, what does the freedom of the city actually deliver? I just don't know because it's been out of...
freedom of the city, and we're going to develop a policy. They used to have that in Armidale. It's all in the mayoral minute.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know, but anyway, don't worry.
Okay, and then the
Don't worry,
council, when it's got a policy, may consider conferring.
Free rates?
Yeah,
Free
okay.
parking?
I propose to put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Item 8.3, the New England Renewable Energy Zone. As I said earlier, I took this to the New England JO on Monday, and the General Managers Group are going to work on developing a policy, and that's the request, that's the recommendation, I should say, on this item. Is there opposition? It doesn't need a second, it's a mayoral minute. Okay, so can I put the motion? All those in favour, to the contrary, carried unanimously. Next item is the 9.1, the rescission motion. I emailed each of you and explained why this was necessary. I formally move the rescission motion on page 13. Been seconded by Councillor Bailey. As you know, you're all emailed about this. Is there a need to discuss it?
No, I just want a clarification and maybe just change the words of the motion.
No,
It's too late.
it's a rescission motion.
Yeah, well...
Well, if you're going to say anything, I'll have to speak first, I guess, as the mover of the motion. So, councillors, you're all emailed regarding the concerns of the financial controller on last month's decision. We don't have the resources to commence the tender process again, and the legal firm of concern to some councillors will not be used, but that shouldn't be disclosed in the resolution, I'm advised. So it's really a procedural thing to do, and we don't have any choice but to do it.
Yeah,
It's been
no,
seconded.
I just wanted to suggest a couple of words in the alternative
The
motion.
rescission motion's on notice. I guess you can move an amendment.
No, I just want to make some suggestions for the words of the alternative motion. Is that part of the rescission motion? No.
The rescission motion is printed on page 13. We've been asked to put that rescission motion through. I don't feel disposed to fiddling with it, quite frankly.
I just wanted to ask a question about.
I don't think that's appropriate given the advice that we've been given. I don't feel disposed to taking questions on the matter. It's a very clear thing we have to do. Thank you, councillor. I therefore am obliged to put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary? I declare it carried. On commencing with item 10.1 on page 14. Councillor Morat, your motion.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move item, 10.1, with an amendment to delete item or line B.
Thank you.
Take that out of it, so it's only A, C and D.
A, C and D. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gallatley. Your motion, councillor.
Mr Mayor, and with due respect to the General Manager, Mr Ron Conn, and our Financial Controller, Mr Rayner, the intent of this motion is to try and put the Armidale Airside Business Park back on track to deliver what it was intended to do when the first touted 20 years ago. Economic growth for our region, jobs for our kids, and with Council's current economic position, a way of funding developments at the airport and retaining jobs. The project has been generously funded to the tune of $6 million by the state government. Construction has been completed, and yet 4 or 5 months down the track, we do not have a registered block of land and are unable to complete the 2 contracts that we've managed to get across the line. We have lost sales, such as a hire car company wanting a site for a depot, which is part of the airport business, only to be told that what they wanted was of strategic importance for the future of the airport and could not be sold. We have had interest in a motel site, the Croft, and airside lots that no one seems to know about. Yet I've been able to produce EIOs that were sent to council as late as last October. Others have inquired about business opportunities with no response. One opportunity even has been put in a Section 88B instrument specifically to block it, when it could have had substantial cost savings and financial gain for council and a fantastic social outcome for the community. We as a council have been reinstated and told we must address the financial issues of this council, and as part of the performance improvement order, we must give the General Manager, Mr Roncon, the resources to address these issues. Council seems to be concentrating on reducing services, delaying projects, slowing growth, and increasing fees and charges to address the budget shortfall. One of the biggest problems is our inability to scope, design, cost, tender, manage, and track a project. This repeatedly impacts council's budget with blowouts, which is compromising our ability to deliver and maintain a balanced budget. Council needs to run this project like a business. Any inquiry today may not be there tomorrow, so we need to get on with things. I do not need to know why we cannot do a job. I want to know how we can make things like this happen. The land sales to date are about $3 million when we complete the contracts. The Croft and the motel site could generate $2 to $2.5 million, plus possible airside sales, which is more than enough to move this project forward. Yes, there are costs, but they are covered by sales. There are jobs for council staff, local contractors, and once the developments are completed, there is rates income, jobs, and growth for the community. Things mentioned in the General Manager's comments. The pumps in the rising main, yes, would cost about $300,000. Sewer mains in the real world are about $200 a linear metre. The Somers Road, if it joined back onto one of the new cul-de-sacs, is not very long and was always going to be an issue in the stage development and should have been allowed for in the scoping and planning of the project. There is a cost for the Don Tidd Boulevard which needs to be addressed. This access to the airport was one of the arguments we used to get funding for the roundabout on the grounds of safety. There is a cost to developing the airport sites which also hasn't been taken into consideration. The amount of funds spent on designing and redesigning this project is ridiculous, and surely this work should be shovel ready. The pace at which we are finalising the registration and sales of the lots is not even close to being realistic in a business environment, and all the highfalutin crap about branding and marketing does not seem to be worrying the development across the road. He has just started a 14-week build and has told the Mayor that he will have up to 8 DAs coming to council at the end of that time. The price for the lots is set in council's fees and charges, so stage development will not be an impact on the pricing, and selling the motel site off the plan before the work is complete will not deter a developer, but could drive inquiry for other blocks. Unsolicited offers, which are often brought up by staff as a reason for not proceeding, can be worked through, and the lot can be put up for either an expression of interest, tender or public auction, which overcomes most of the issues. We must vote to move this project on and give the General Manager the resources he needs to achieve the desired result of improving council's bottom line, creating jobs and economic growth for our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a speaker? The seconder, Councillor Gladley, wish to speak to the motion?
I'll just have it. This is going to be very, very quick, but that's Councillor Murat pretty well covered the whole lot. I personally am sick of being the laughing stock of the business community as far as this goes. We're not recreating the wheel with this. This is an industrial business, a development, probably very similar to an ordinary domestic subdivision with the same amount of blocks, mate. If it was under private hands, it would have been well and truly over a long time ago. Let's get it on the market. Let's get a bit of money going in there and give the community a bit of confidence in us now, because this is a very, very good way to getting the community behind us, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I call for a speaker against, I'm going to ask the General Manager or Mr Rayner for comment, given that there's obviously cost and strategic implications in the motion. I just want to be sure that we can do this. So, Mr Roncon?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm sympathetic to what's been expressed by Councillor Murad, I think, and I respect that there is a desire to want to get on with the project. I think, though, in fairness to Council, and given where we are in the financial year as well, we need to, I guess, acknowledge that we are in a tight financial situation, and I know the desire is to want to see us move out of that, but I think what we really need to try and avoid is the perception, or what could be perceived as policy on the run with adopting a motion like this. And I've mentioned this in some messaging to you recently, but it's clear to me that there's a bit of a breakdown in the vision for what, yes, perhaps what council are seeing as the ultimate vision for this project versus what the staff are delivering. And I certainly, and I don't have any background to that, so that's just for me. This is really just my observation, and I really would suggest that, you know, if you can see your way clear to refer this to the budget process, where we can really sort of sit down and hash it out and really get a clear understanding of where we want to be, what the ultimate goal is, how we want, you know, what do we want a boutique, clean industry type businesses that are going in there, or are we happy to have, you know, whatever might come along? But I think, and then to understand how we're actually going to fund the motel and the Transport Museum site and all of those other sites. I really do feel that the draft budget process is the right place to really try and hash this out and get a really clear way forward. You're the governing body, as has been quite rightly mentioned before, and the opportunity exists for you to provide us some direction. But I think that direction that you provide would be, you know, useful perhaps with a bit of a recap of where the project's been over the last 3 or 4 years. And there's an opportunity for some of the staff to be able to provide that in conjunction with the closing of the expressions of interest for the appointment of a sale agent who may very well, whoever gets that role, may very well have a view that they'd like to express about a pathway forward as well. So, and then, so that, Mr Mayor, they would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr General Manager. Could I suggest, in light of those comments, Councillor Murad, that you move that your motion be taken to budget process for consideration? You won't withdraw it? Okay. Therefore, I'm looking for you've spoken. A speaker against?
I'm sort of at this stage quite supporting the suggestion that the General Manager gave, because, you know, there may be aspects of this we don't know about. We need to be more fully informed. We need to see how it works within the budget, and it just may be more a productive step rather than, as you said, policy on the run. While I completely sympathise with Councillor Murad, I'm a bit concerned we'll be taking steps that we may not, without knowing the full ramifications. So I don't think I'll be supporting it at this stage.
I don't believe, given our financial protocols, we really should be debating it. But anyway, you wish to?
Well, can I move an amendment? So that my amendment would be that we do actually refer this to the 21-22 budget deliberations. 2021-22 budget deliberations that are upcoming.
Thank you. That's not a direct negative, is it? No. Okay. There's an amendment moved. Is it seconded? Seconded. Okay. We've had speakers for. We haven't had speakers against it. Do you wish to debate it further, or can we put the matters? Councillor Bailey.
Mr Mayor, I have sympathy with both sides, but let me just say that I think, you know, whilst we sit and cogitate and wait for budget deliberations, we'll lose more and more sales across the road. Now, I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad thing, because there's still going to be Armidale businesses, but we've got a large investment at the airport, and it's up to us to try and make the land sell. and it's important that we get on with it. Every time we delay, and I understand reasons about budget, but we tried to have a proper budget discussion a month ago to try and bring in some mini budget, and that wasn't allowed. So, you know, we're really in a situation where we're just going round in circles. We need to find a way that we can move forward. And I support Councillor Murat and Councillor Gallatley. It looks like we might be in the minority at this stage, but I think we want to try and move the project forward, so I'll support it.
Thank you. That's the speaker against. Against. Speaker for.
Can I suggest, if with the permission of the mover and the seconder, and a slight variation to the wording of the amendment?
The amendment is to refer to budget process. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add another few words just to say, and brought back to the March 2021 meeting.
The budget process goes right through till June.
But in other words, we try and make a decision much quicker than...
I don't think you can do that, removed from the budget process as one item.
Why can't you do that, Mr Mayor, if I can just ask?
I've just explained. It's one item out on its own. You look at the budget process in its totality, okay? Look, no, please, all remarks through the chair, please. Let's get on with it. Can I put the motion? Yes, I'm sorry. You're right to reply to Councillor Murat.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Gallatley, thank you.
The intent has been to try and move this forward. There's no dates on there, so there's nothing saying this has to be done before the end of the financial year. What my intent is to get this project, as Councillor Barty said, moving, and to open up opportunities when budget discussions occur to take in other options to try and deliver what the community are wanting. As I said in my statement, we seem to be cutting costs, deferring projects and putting up fees and charges. We're not looking at other opportunities. The funding that could be gained if we can get on with this project could be what we need to help soften the blow of the budget for the ratepayers. It could help us get out of a financial mess. We need, as Councillor Barty said, to push this project on. The amount of time we've taken to get the registration of this land happening is not on. It's just we're just dragging the chain. We need to get the land registered. We need to get the couple of sales we have across the line. We can use that funding to do some of this other work at the airport and slowly push this on. We can't sit on the fence. We need to move this project on, and we need to have this opportunity come budget discussion time. So that's why we can't defer it till after the budget. Come budget discussion time to try and take some of the possible income, some of the possible sales into the context of the budget, which may make a huge difference. And to my way of thinking, that is financial responsibility to try and get this council out of a bloody great mess.
Thank you. I'm in error in that I should have put the amendment before I asked you for your right of reply, but your right of reply effectively concludes the debate. No, sorry about that. So I'm going to put the amendment, which is that the matter be referred to budget process. Those in favour of the amendment? We have 1, 2, 3. Come on, look, let's be brave. Those in favour of the amendment? 2. Those against? 5. I therefore put the motion. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? 5 to 2. The motion's... Item 10.2, the Australian Transport Museum. In view of Councillor Murat's declaration earlier, I'll move the 4-part General Manager's comment on page 18 as the motion. And I understand that's acceptable to the mover of the notice of motion. So is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gallatley. Is there a need for debate? If not, I'll put the motion.
Can I just make a comment?
No, you can speak. You can ask a question.
I'll speak against it then.
Okay, well, I don't propose to speak for it. It's very straightforward. It's our General Manager's advice. Seconder speak forward? No? You don't?
I don't, it's, we just go ahead, let's get stuck into it.
Thank you.
That's what we've got to do.
Councillor Robinson speaking against the
Yeah,
motion.
well, it was really more of a question, and that is basically that although we have, we should certainly be accepting the land offered by the Transport Museum as a visitor and information centre, I wouldn't like to think that that precluded any other possible location for a visitor centre, say when the Transport Museum is closed. And so perhaps the General Manager could actually answer the question as to whether it's possible to also have visitor information or display boards at other locations when the museum is closed, or at other times when might be convenient. Or whether it is in the General Manager's opinion that would preclude that option.
I'm happy to offer a view there, Mr Mayor, and I don't think there's any proposal to close the existing visitor information centre near Hungry Jack's there, so that I imagine... Well, ultimately that will be a decision for you as the council, but Councillor Murat may have a view.
Mr Mayor, to answer Councillor Robinson's question, the entry foyer / proposed area for a tourist information centre is in the museum, but doesn't allow access into the museum. So if the council wished to take up the offer to run a tourist information centre there, it could be run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the council's discretion without interfering with the operations of the museum.
Thank you. I'd like to be able to put this motion. Is there any opposition? No, don't see any opposition. I've therefore put the motion, which is it's the 4 parts on the foot of page 18, which Hayley's about to put on the screen. All those in favour? To the contrary? Carried. 10.3, reinstating water savings rebates. Councillor Robinson.
Can I move an alternative motion, please? And that motion is that Council seeks external funding to reinstate the water saving rebates.
Thank you. It's been seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Could I ask a question as to where those funds might be sourced? I'm not aware of funds being available for that purpose.
Only a quick response, Councillor. We did try, and we tried hard through DPIE Water to get support from the state government for those measures, and they declined and declined. And that was a little bit of a worry and concern to us, because we thought that was some of the more effective water saving measures. So at this stage we were on our own. That's not to say it's never possible, but it wasn't obvious to us in the drought.
Nice and slowly.
That Council seeks external funding to reinstate the water savings rebates.
Okay, well, we've just been told that, well, you just heard what Mr McDonald said. Is there a seconder for the motion? It's been seconded by Councillor O'Brien. I'm sorry, Councillor O'Brien's hand was raised before yours, Councillor. Councillor Robinson, your motion.
Thank you. Well, one reason for actually putting this motion, given that we are under such stringent financial constraints, is that maybe having a council resolution will help support future applications, just to demonstrate that the council is in favour of this and the community is in favour of this. And secondly, as the graph in the background information to the report shows, the red dotted line is the secure yield under climate change, even after raising the dam wall. And what it shows is that demand is still likely to outstrip supply if we don't continue to find ways of becoming more efficient. And reinstating water-saving rebates is one cost-effective way of making ends meet. According to the figures provided by Scott MacDonald last year, even if the state government foots the entire bill, depreciation costs to raising the dam wall will add another $1 per kilolitre to water charges. And we've already had protest after protest saying that they're already too high. I've been listening to our residents who think that charges are too high, and also remember that the cost of raising the dam wall, $90 to $95 million. That's about that's about the same as providing the entire region with water at no charge for nearly 10 years. So let's really see if we can find alternative ways that are cheaper and also help us out of this hole of the fact that even if we raise the wall, we still might be suffering water shortages according to the latest predictions. So whatever we can do, yes, maybe we can get the money to raise the dam wall, and maybe we will, and also maybe it will cost us $1 a kilolitre extra. But this is also something we need to do in parallel. So let's look at both options and see what we can do and get the best possible outcome for our community.
Thank you, Councillor. I draw your attention to the General Manager's comment. This should be referred to budget considerations. Councillor O'Brien, you wish to speak for the motion? To the motion?
Yeah, all of the community has clearly spoken loudly and clearly about how much they're hurting on the whole water rates. And if we can find any way, even if you think it's a difficult one, and even if it doesn't happen, but if we can find any way to help them, I think it's a no-brainer. We should at least try. Thank you.
Speaker against? Other speakers? There's no one against? I don't think. Therefore the right of reply is appropriate, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It was her notice of motion. She's changed the notice of motion. So those in favour? Those against? It's carried 6 votes to 1. 10.4, the Regional Marketing Fund. Councillor Bailey.
One of the challenges we face, we've heard a lot about people leaving Sydney. We've heard a lot about people relocating. Are we getting our fair share? I think during the disruption we've had over the last 12 months, I don't believe we've been doing the marketing that we necessarily should be. I'm not proposing that we spend any more money. I'm actually proposing that we reallocate $100,000 from the Economic Development or the Tourism Fund into a regional marketing fund, and we approach business and the government sectors to match it dollar for dollar. So if the business and government sectors raise $50,000, we'll allocate $50,000 of what we've already got into that fund. The only challenge will be that the fund would be managed by regional growth, which means that it's got to come back to council anyway. So all I'm doing is trying to take what the Economic Development and Tourism team have already got and stretch it even further by encouraging community participation and community contribution. And I think it will work if we give it the effort and the impetus, because all we, as I say, is taking some money we've already got, moving it across into another area, going to the government and commercial sector, and hopefully getting matching money, which means we're doubling our money or doubling our investment for no cost.
Thank you. I should have called for a seconder before you spoke. Is there a seconder to the motion? Seconded by Councillor Morat. Do you wish to, I should remind you again on the General Manager's comment on page 22 that this matter should be referred to budget for consideration. So we had a speaker for. Councillor Morat, do you wish to speak as seconder? You don't. Therefore I'll ask for a speaker against.
I said I think I'm against it. And I'd like to foreshadow a motion that this question be referred to the budget deliberations. Well, I think I think it would be an opposite meaning. Yes, I'm speaking again. Yeah, I'm noting that, and I'm speaking against the motion. As I understand it, this motion will, in effect, turn the Economic Development Committee into a kind of Section 355 committee, because there appears to be an anticipation that that committee will have spending authority, which at the moment only Section 355 committees have, and on that basis I think it needs more consideration and discussion. So I'm not prepared to support it at this stage.
Thank you. That's the speaker against the motion. Speaker for? There's no other speakers. I propose you need the right of reply, Councillor Bailey. Thank you. I'll put the motion as printed on page 21. All those in favour? 1. Those against? That's your hand up or down, Councillor? You're swatting. You're scratching your eye, sorry. Be careful, you'll buy a bullock. Right, let's go again. Those in favour of the motion? 1, 2. Those against? 5. The motion's lost. Your 10.5, Councillor Bailey's motion, you
We
move
have the
it
foreshadowed motion.
in relation to the last item. In relation to the Regional Marketing Fund. Okay. Please state your motion.
Well, I'm moving it. I'm moving it to save the idea because I think it's quite a good one, and we really.
So your motion was to refer it to budget process. Your foreshadowed motion.
Correct.
Thank
I'm now
you.
moving it.
Thank you. And you're seconding it, Councillor Robinson. You're seconding it. Do we need to debate? I don't think so. No? Okay, I put the motion. All those in favour? 6 to 1. Declare that motion to refer to budget carried. Moving to 10 point. Water rates, Councillor Bailey. You move
Mr.
the
Mayor.
motion? No, you're going to move the motion?
Yes.
You are. Is there a seconder? I'll second it for the purposes of debate. Your motion.
Mr. Mayor, we've heard a lot about Council's budget situation. Probably one of the most important things that I found out today, and I thank the staff for their assistance, we're approximately $1.2 million behind the revenue budget for water for this year, because we've been so successful at banging people over the head with a water increase for the Gaia residents of up to 95% because of the 60% rate rise and then rates harmonisation on top of that, and 62% for Armidale ratepayers, that they've stopped using the product we want them to use. So we're now in a situation where water has become such a rare commodity that we're going to face this $1.2, $1.3 million shortfall in the water budget, the water revenue. Does this mean we're going to turn around and put through another 30% increase? You know, what sort of business goes out and sells a product, and when it doesn't reach its revenue target, it puts the price up by 62%? I've not seen that marketing strategy or sales strategy ever work successfully before. So I think it's bold. You go where no one else has ever gone before. But, you know, what I'm proposing is to try and fix the problem two ways. Firstly, if we can get people using water because we are giving them a reduction of 20%, I think we will see a return to better usage of water, allowing for the constraints of the water supply. But we've proven before that we don't need pricing to reduce people's water supply. We got down to 135 litres through a PR and massive public support campaign for use of water. We took it from over 220 down to 135. We should be so proud of our community, and we didn't, but in administration we rewarded them by banging them straight over the head with a massive increase. Look at our colleagues to the south in Tamworth. Drought was even more severe there, and guess what? They put their water rates up by 2%. Sydney, great old Sydney, you know, they've got desalination plants. They've discounted their water even further. And yet we're proposing to continue with a water regime that will become a positive disincentive to move here. No wonder we're seeing people move from Armidale to Uralla, because the water is so much cheaper down there. We've got to find a way to bring some sanity back in by showing our good intent that from July 1 we would reduce our water charge by 20%, and I think we'll see a return to a positive situation for the water revenue for this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I remind councillors of the General Manager's comment that this should be referred to budget for consideration. I don't intend to speak as seconder. Is there a speaker, therefore, in opposition? Yeah. Councillor Glapley.
Right, we've got the commodity here of water, and it's an essential item. I can't see that you can compare that to selling steak or anything else, or push bikes or motor cars as far as it goes. It's not selling anything. We are supplying it for us. Yes, it's gone guts up with the drought. There's no doubt about that. But you can't look at it through the way that Councillor Bailey is. And he's mentioning Uralla. Poor old Uralla are on bottled water when they ran out of water. There's a fair chance if we do get this wall, I'll tell you what, Uralla will be looking at us for getting a bit of water going to them, because we're sort of 1/3 of the way there nearly with it up there. I just look at this as a bit of a vote getter myself, but it's it's not going to happen on my watch if that's the case anyway. Thank you.
The Speaker for the motion. The Speaker against. Right of reply, Councillor.
I understand Councillor Galatly's cynicism, but let me say that water is an essential commodity for a percentage of it, the sharing, the watering. But there's also a lot of water in there that is not an essential commodity. People do things with water. And so as a consequence, there is a percentage of water that will result in increased use if we can give them some kind of price relief. And that's what I'm proposing. Sort of proposing price relief for 20%, and I believe that next year we'll return to a bigger sales and get a better result.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? 1. Those against? 6. The motion's lost. Item 10.6 on page 26. I understand, Councillor Robinson, that this matter's been actioned and that you may be able to withdraw the item.
Some of it has been actioned, but a lot of it hasn't. So
a lot of it hasn't.
Perhaps I could actually delete some of the bits that have been actioned and say that unless there are significant reasons, cost or inconvenience, Council implements 1 to 3 below, and otherwise considers the costs and benefits of 6 when the website is redeveloped. 1 to 3, and considering 6 when the website is redeveloped. Deleting 4 and 5, because I believe they will be actioned. Thank you. Well, I believe that notices of motion are one way of showing our residents the process is in action, and that when we hear about problems or see difficulties, that we are trying to act on them. It's showing that Council is being responsible and responsive. And I'd really just like to very, very briefly explain why some of these ideas below are important. And for one, I listened to Councillor Bailey's concerns that not enough people were subscribing to the e-news to compensate us for the loss of our local print media. And we all agree about the importance of communication. We've all heard the problems of the public complaining about things they didn't know about, be it public consultations or the dates and times of the coffee catch-ups. And if staff are taking the time and the trouble to write informative articles. Why not make it easier for people to see them? And in fact, I did actually discover by accident after submitting this motion that what I was suggesting is already there, but I didn't know it, and I suspect that the person who wrote the response to my notice of motion didn't either. So all we need for one is a 5-minute link, 5 minutes of somebody's time to put a link from a prominent page, perhaps the newsroom page, and that's a win-win situation, especially given the other factors. The problems that we're having already with Facebook, which might reduce opportunities for communication. And similarly for option 2, the response to the notice of motion was really the most difficult way of solving a simple problem. We don't need an automatic process, just a sort of process that council staff are already doing for development applications. And all it will take is a couple of minutes per submission. And we are not getting inundated with submissions. For last month, we had a total of 6 submissions from 3 public consultations. So it's only going to take maybe half an hour to just make those submissions public as they come along. And and as you say again, I mean, I was at the Ratepayers Association meeting and I just saw how many people didn't understand what was going on. And this is just one simple way of encouraging the community to engage with us. They see what other people have submitted and they can say yes or no. We can have an interesting and productive debate. So it's not, public consultation is not a tick box exercise. And if this helps consultation then and gives us valuable feedback, then let's do it, because it's not going to take a lot of time. And similarly for setting a closing time of midnight. You know, it's worth noting that we had six submissions this time, and one of them got the closing time wrong. And they apologised for missing the 5 p.m. deadline. So if we take it to midnight, then we just taking a few bits of text out of the page. It makes it simpler, easier, and you avoid the obvious confusion of that submitter. So let's please do that. I will just make one other comment about option item 6, which is that we do again have difficulties with communication. And the thing that I thought about was the difficulties of parking at the airport, something that I've reminded people about. I've put in requests several times, and we hear everybody else has put in requests several times. If we, as a part of our website development, have a way to keep track of these, then everybody's going to be a lot more efficient, productive and happier. Thanks. So I encourage you to support the revised motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Brien?
Oh, just briefly, that sharing knowledge and communicating with the community is a pretty crucial part of our job, for sure. So I would support her motion. Thank you.
Speakers against? Speaker against? No speakers against. I therefore put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried 5 votes to 2. Councillor Robinson, it's a supplementary.
Supplement.
Point 7, revised water notice of motion.
Well, this, I think, was meant to be one simple way.
Are you moving it, Councillor?
Oh, yeah, I'll move it, sorry.
Moving it. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor O'Brien, I think. Yes? Councillor, would you like to read your motion?
Yeah, I move the motion.
Would you read your motion,
I'll
please?
read the motion. Subject to community consultation, water charges in the current financial year are revised so that when water is scarce and our community is subject to water restrictions, commercial users pay the same rates per kilolitre as residential users, and the increased revenue is used to fund a $15 a quarter reduction in residential water bills.
Thank you, and it's been seconded, and you obviously, some of you haven't seen the General Manager's comment. Again, this matter be referred to budget deliberations. Your motion, Councillor Robinson.
I must admit I didn't see that one in the supplementary agenda. Can the General Manager confirm it's there? I'll believe you. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, well, we've all heard the complaints about we've all heard the complaints about hefty price increases per kilolitre for residents who don't use a lot of water. And I've always thought this was somewhat unfair. And that for that reason, a majority of councils tried to address the issue by a motion to reduce residential bills by $100 a year. That was in June 2020. And we were just about to vote on the motion, and I believe it would have been supported when we were dismissed. And so now, obviously, we can't do that because of the financial constraints. So all this motion aims to do is give our residential users a small amount of relief this financial year, because some people are desperately in need of it. And it is a way of rewarding the people who use the least water. For example, a household using 10 kilolitres a quarter would have a reduction of $1.50 a kilolitre. It's not as much as I'd like, but it does show we are listening and we're doing whatever we can within the financial constraints. And listening again to our residents and noting that one submission on the drought management plan made specifically this recommendation that when resources are scarce, when water is scarce, we should all be paying the same charge. In other words, commercial users, we shouldn't be charging commercial users a lower rate than residential users. And as far as I know, this has to be subject to public consultation. And this allows commercial users to put their case as well. If it's going to cause real hardship or problems, then obviously that is our job at the next council meeting when the council consultation is complete to take account of it. But I do note in that context that one commercial user was refunded the cost of $44,000 of infrastructure at the Izziard Park bore, and that's almost half the cost of the increase. So let's consult our community and ask them what they think is fair. And if this is what our community wants, then I hope we will endorse the suggestion once after the end of the consultation period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Brien, no need to speak. Is there a speaker in opposition?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's a really interesting approach. You contract with someone to provide water, they employ 500, 700 people, university 1,200 people, and all of a sudden we say things are crook and talarook, and we're going to put your water rates up to, put your water rates down or to the same as residential. It just won't work. You've got to have an arrangement in place where you support people that employ people. And the university, Costas, the car dealers, the big accountants in town, all those people employ people. We shouldn't be in the business of slugging them. And I'm sorry, we're in a situation where we're trying to help business grow. One of the first things you'll see in here somewhere is people want a population growth of 3%. Well, this will really help if we start slugging people every time things get a bit tight. Other councils have similar water policies. They'll have a residential rate, they'll have a commercial rate, and they'll have something like, I know one council has a special rate for abattoirs because they employ a lot of people. Another one has a special rate for the chicken farms because they employ a lot of people. You've got to try and encourage people to employ. And if we continually slug them, it's not going to work. We'll be back to the situation when the other cities are growing at a good rate, we'll still be sitting at 26,000 people living in Armidale.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaker for? Speaker against?
I want to speak for.
Speaking for?
Well, I want to speak for the principle behind this motion. I agree that you've got to provide certainty, but when it's taken to an extreme, the support for businesses, and I note it's a differential support, when the weight of that, the cost of that is being borne by ordinary residents to an unethical and inequitable extent, then you really need to do the kind of exercise that Councillor Robinson is trying to do here. I think that we've got to offer certainty, and to that extent I do agree with Councillor Bailey, but I don't think we're in a situation where this is clear, and I think it does deserve a lot more debate amongst the members of the governing body, because I don't think the current situation is acceptable in any way in terms of its equity towards residents.
Thank you. That was Speaker. Which way? Are there other speakers? Right of reply, Councillor Robinson? Do you need it?
Oh, I've got one. Oh, sorry, I don't know the quite process for this, but could we also...
You opted not to speak as
Can
seconder,
I
but you now want
foreshadow
to speak.
an amendment or something like that?
What? Yes, you can move an amendment.
Move an amendment? Is that all right? Well,
Let's hear it. Yep. Let's hear
That
it.
this also be subject to, or be moved to discussion in the budget discussions? Yes, sorry, however you put it. Yes, that. Are you happy with that? No, she's not happy with it.
The motion wants to revise water charges. You want to take it to budget for consideration.
Well, I'm kind of foreshadowing that if she doesn't get...
Well, if
I'll move that it be deferred to the budget process.
that's an amend. That's a foreshadowed motion. Yes.
No, I want it laid on the table until the budget session, until the budget process is
Hang on, aren't I doing that?
Excuse me. Councillor Robinson, are you agreeable to that? To have it dealt with in budget context?
For next year. This is for the
and
current
we're starting that
years.
process with workshops next week.
Well, I'm happy to defer it as long as it comes back to the March meeting. Is that acceptable to everybody?
I think we're all agreed. Why don't we just accept the motion of Councillor Bailey that this matter be considered in budget considerations, which is the advice of our GM again?
With great respect, this is just a procedural objection, if you like. I think Councillor O'Brien had proposed a motion to the exact same effect, but prior in time to Councillor Bailey's proposal.
Yes, she did. I haven't accepted either of those at this stage. I was asking the mover whether they'd like to defer the matter to budget considerations, and she has said yes, I think.
No.
You haven't said yes.
In the current financial year. The budget deliberations are for next year.
Okay, so that's not being withdrawn. Okay, so you're moving that the matter, let's call it a foreshadowed motion for ease. It is amendment. You're amending the motion.
I don't know whether that's a foreshadowed motion or a foreshadowed amendment or...
Look, I'll accept it, but my personal view is that that's looking to change the fee regime. That's one thing, and you're looking to take it to budget as another thing, but I'll accept it as an amendment.
Thank you.
I need a seconder for the amendment. It's seconded by Councillor Bailey. You got to...
Mr Mayor, can I ask the General Manager, please, if it is correct that that would be a variation to council's fees and charges that would have to go out for public consultation. Therefore, for the time that process was completed, it couldn't happen in this financial year anyway, so there's no point in trying to push it through. It should be referred to the budget for next financial year.
Your question, Mr General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Correct, Councillor Murray. Yeah, I mean, even if we were to go through the full consultation process and do this, you might be looking at June at best. And I'm not even sure we could achieve that in terms of workload with everything else that's going on. So it'd be quite a substantial change. So if councillor's happy to refer it to the budget process where we can look at it holistically and understand what the greater impacts are, I think that would be a wise approach. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Am I able to put this so we can move on, bearing in mind the time, and we don't want to run out of time? Okay. We've got an amendment. Do we have to have a debate on the amendment? It's pretty straightforward. So, therefore, the mover of the original motion, you have a right of reply before I put the amendment.
All I can say is I was really, really hoping we could get this small reduction in residential water charges this financial year, and it's really, really sad that we can't. And if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But it's really, really sad for the people in our community that are hurting. And we have to remember that in this case, we didn't set those water charges. They were set by the interim administrator. And he did say that they could be reviewed during this financial year. And now it seems that we can't. So the only other point is simply that it was the residential users that saw the huge increase in charges, whereas the commercial users had virtually no increase in their water charges, and in some cases a decrease. So that was what I was trying to do, was address the inequity of the big increase for residential users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That concludes the debate. I put the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The amendment is carried. It becomes a motion. I put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried unanimously. Moving along to item 11.1, the significant accounting policies for rescission. Is someone prepared to move? Councillor Morat, seconded somewhere? Councillor Galatli, need to debate? No need to debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. Moving to the 12 items, I'm going to call these items. First one, 12.1, investment policy. Just say yes if you want to talk about it. 12.2, cash and investment report. I think we need a briefing on 12.3, so I'll call that. 12.4, Stronger Communities Fund. 12.5, Local Strategic Planning Instrument merging. 12.6, Armidale Plan 2040. 12.7 was dealt with. So the only item called is 12.3. I take a motion to adopt. Thank you, Mr. Councillor Morat. 12, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Moved by Councillor Morat, seconded somewhere. Councillor O'Connor, thank you. Any debate? Put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. I call 12.3, and I'm hoping that our finance officer, it's our Director of Organisational and Corporate Services. I call this for a very good reason, because it's a very good story. We now have an anticipated surplus for the year of $2.054 million. That's a story that we need to get out there, that we are on the mend financially. We'll have that explained to us now, perhaps, in broad terms.
Thank you, councillors. This report presents Council's second quarter budget review. Importantly, the report reflects an underlying improvement to the general fund of $2,052,748. This is comprised of business savings of almost $2.6 million, grants and other revenue, and offset by increased costs, which are partially to do with grants and reduced revenue due to COVID and other impacts. Of interest is the overall reduction in airport revenues of 70% to $377,000 from $1.1 million, which is not unexpected given the impacts of the pandemic. We have a number of revenue increases in relation to grant funding, such as phase 2 of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Grant, $82,000 for LED street lighting upgrade rebates, and $990,000 revenue increase in waste. There is a decrease in the unrestricted cash from $3.4 million to $3.3 million, and that's related to proceeds from sale of land being moved into a reserve. And apart from those proceeds from sale of land, the movement is $70,000, so relatively minor. And there has also been a small movement in the capital program as we prioritise project finalisation. Currently, we're at 60% spent or committed in the capital project area. Across the organisation, our managers have worked very hard and reviewed the budget line by line and looked at every possible saving from amounts of $200 up to very large figures. There has been savings in our staff areas, and as a result of that, in a number of projects. And in a number of project areas, we have either deferred projects or found alternate sources of funding. As you're aware, we've been very successful in receiving grants throughout the year. So there have been a number of areas impacted. For example, our website redevelopment has been put on hold because we have been lucky enough to be able to apply for funding to do that. So we're awaiting the outcome of that funding. We've recognised $41,000 saving in sustainability due to the capitalisation of costs and moving them into the capital program. And we've saved over $250,000 in the finance team by deferring some system enhancements in relation to ledger configuration. So the staff have worked very, very hard to look for savings across the organisation, have been very effective in doing that. And I'm very happy with the way that the organisation has pulled together to do that. So I present this to you for your review.
Thank you, Director. Are there questions?
Mr Mayor, could I move that we congratulate the outstanding work of the General Manager in 3 weeks to achieve all this, but more importantly, the outstanding work of the staff in bringing the budget back, and to your team and to both everybody who works at Council, they are to be congratulated, because for the last
No.
period we've been getting bad.
You're moving it.
Well, yeah, I'm moving it.
That's it. It's moved. Is there a seconder? I need one. Who's going to put the hand up first? Councillor O'Brien is seconding it. I think the sentiments are shared everywhere, and you probably don't need to say any more. With respect, over to you. Yeah, I think that's right. Very good.
Mr Mayor, could I just say we've been sitting here for over 2.5 hours.
I'm well aware of that, and I'm going to have a break very shortly, but I'm going to punish you for a while longer.
Oh, well, it's not
just
me,
a little
it's
while
organs.
longer. Yeah, I'm well aware of this. I'm also aware of the time constraints we have. We've got to finish by 8:30. I'm going to call item 13, see how we go, then we might take a break. Offer a little incentive. 13.1, installation of Markham Street. Sorry? I'm sorry, we didn't know that. So it's been moved by Councillor Marat. The quarterly review be adopted. Is it seconded somewhere? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. No opposition. Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. Item 13.1, installation of Market. Just yell out yes loudly if you need to talk to it. Markham Street mid-block pedestrian crossing. 2, local approval policy, liquid trade waste. 3, domestic rainwater tanks policy. 4, relocation of buildings policy. 5, donation to Council of 1A, the Boulevard, called by Councillor Gallatley. 13.6, grant application EPA, bushfire waste. 13.7, Gyra preschool and long day care, response to Department of Education, called by Councillor Bailey. 13.8 that we've dealt with. 13.9, I should be marking these, I'm sorry. So 13.5, 13.7 is called. 13.9, Project 030 update. 13.10, street tree removal, McDonald Avenue. 13.11, unauthorised urban street plantings. 13.12, removal of grant application, Environment Protection Authority circular program. 13, Gyra preschool and long day care, the update on the project and progress of the fund, called by Councillor Marat. That's 13.13 is called. 13.14, the Gyra preschool, the funding applications and the long day care centre. And 13.15, green waste services and fees, Councillor Councillor Robinson. There are 4 called. All that, I'd take a motion to adopt all except 13.5, 13.7, 13.13 and 13.15. It's been moved by Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Connor. No opposition. Put the motion. All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. We've got 4 items to deal with under the 13th section. We'll have an adjournment now and resume at 7 o'clock promptly. Seats. Councillor Gallatley and folk, please take your seats. Moving right along. We move to item 13.5. I think Councillor Gallatley called this. Councillor Gallatley, item 13.5, you called?
Can I call 14.2? You done that?
13.5, okay, I'm having a bit of trouble. Oh, sorry.
Oh, we have, thank you.
Beg your pardon? I'd like to ask some questions, thank you.
Thank you. Director, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mayor. An offer was received from Rosbill Constructions for council to acquire this lot of land, lot 105 DB 126695, known as 1A the Boulevard, Armidale Regional Council acquiring it. Council officers recommend that it not be resumed by council or not be taken over by council. This is a small sliver of land that was part of a subdivision. It created 5 lots. There is no, the report says there's no upside to council. There would be a small reduction in revenue. It would be an extra commitment in terms of vegetation removal and management, and the recommendation council does not accept the offer.
Thank you. Over to you. Do you have a motion you wish to move?
I'd like to move a motion that this be turned over and we accept it because the land has got no value to anyone else bar ourselves.
Okay, just to get the motion on the floor.
Okay.
On the second line, that council accept. You take out does not wish to.
Yeah.
And that council accept. Is that seconded?
Yep, that sounds. Yep.
Is that seconded anywhere? Seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Your motion, Councillor.
The reason being, looking at it, I presume everyone's had a look. There's really nothing you can do with it. And I've just got a quick question. What is an access denial strip? This is what I'm a little bit confused about as well. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I thought we'd been through questions, but can you answer that?
Sorry, the map shows it is a strip of land above the lot just below it. I think that's what it's referring to. But say, from council's perspective, it doesn't add anything. Yeah, it's 252 square metres, as I say. I think there's another report later on for councillors, there was a question on notice from a councillor about why vegetation's not being managed in certain areas, and this goes to the load that council has at the moment in terms of doing what the job it has in front of it at the moment without adding to it.
Thank you. Just before you continue, I probably should have asked whether other councillors have questions on this matter. You do?
Can I just ask one question? This
yes,
is
you may. I might direct this to Mr. Hallman, perhaps.
Yeah, no, this is an access denial strip, and presumably, if it remains in the hands of the current owner, the access could be reinstated. Is that possible?
I might call on Ambrose to give us some detail.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor. So just in reference to Councillor Gallatley's comment about what an access denial strip is, they were a planning method that was used many years ago when subdivisions were done along major arterial roads. A strip of land was essentially subdivided off and provided into council's ownership to prevent access to a property. in relation to Councillor Robinson's comment or question in regards to could the property at 1A, the Boulevard, get access? If the land was transferred to their ownership, yes, they could apply to council to gain access. They would need a 138 Road Act approval from council as the roads authority to do that.
Okay. Can we, is that all the questions? I have one. Could this be seen as creating a precedent if the council went against the staff recommendation?
Creating a precedent if council went against the staff recommendation? Yes.
Will other people come forward and want to do the same thing?
Well, potentially, I can't really comment on what people may or may not do. We did identify a number of these access denial strips in the land investment strategy as pieces of land that council didn't want, and indeed this was part of a much larger lot that was disposed of by council in, I think it was 2018.
Councillor Bailey, your question?
Does Armidale Regional Council have a disproportionately high amount of green space that it has to manage for a council of its size?
I can't actually answer that question. I don't know the exact figures, so I'd take that on notice and come back to you.
Okay. Can we move back to debate, given the hour? Have you said sufficient in relation to speaking to the motion, or do you want to say some more?
Can I please just make some more comments with this? The way I see this is that the developer will refuse to pay rates on this land. The rates are actually $567 a quarter, so whatever that works into for the whole lot. So you're looking at over $2,000 for what's known. It will just come back to us anyway. It is no use to him whatsoever, and it's got me bewildered how that we, for a start, or council who sold this to him back a few years ago, had that in there. I've got no idea. When you go and personally have a look at it, it's a no-brainer. It is not usable for anything except there's a hedge on along half of it, and it's a path. It's just access for pedestrians. So I can't see. It's going to be a pain in the bum for us to be keeping on sending out bills to something that he's not going to pay anyway. So that's what I look at it as. Thank you.
Thank you. The seconder? No, you're on. Okay. Any other speaker against? No other speakers? Can I put the motion? The motion is to accept, not to accept. Okay. Those in favour? Those against? The motion's carried 5 votes to 2. Item 13.7 on page 82, Guyra Preschool. This is a good news story.
Thank you, councillors. As you're aware, reported by the acting general manager at the time, and then last month we expanded on the challenge we had up there at the Guyra Preschool. After, I guess you'd say, negotiations with the Department of Education, we were able to restrict the work that we had to do to the breaches succinctly, if you like, and we don't have to go down the path of substantial building works in the kitchen and the storage and the laundry, and so that's been able to wind back that expenditure to about $34,000, I think it was, and that was a good outcome from our perspective.
Question?
Yeah, the question that arises for me is that being relieved of that sort of risk of over-investing in the existing, former railway station master's residence to a new premise, does this buy us time to reconsider exactly how the replacement of the provision of a new facility, does this buy council time to kind of plan that more efficiently and carefully. It takes the pressure off us, in other words. Is that the case?
I think it is the case. 2 points. When we had the Department of Education up there, they made the point to us a number of times that they would let us do that restricted amount of work on the basis that we were going to make some improvements develop a plan for an upgraded or a new place. So they don't dictate to us exactly what that might be. And to answer the second part of your question, it's my intention to bring to the March Council meeting a comprehensive report on where that project sits, its source of fundings, the scale of the project, and a number of other factors such as the Office of Local Government Capital Expenditure Review, the business case review, so it'll be quite a comprehensive report.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the recommendation of the staff? Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Gallatley, any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour. To the contrary, carried. Moving to 13.13 on page 103. The update on the project. That's you again. I'll get you to introduce this item and explain why the rescission.
That's me again. Thank you, Mayor. There's 4 parts to this motion. One is requesting rescission of the appointment of CKDS back in November last year. We're moving that work internal, and any other design work will be within the project. So I'm asking Council to approve the termination of CKDS. I can give you the assurance that I have spoken to CKDS and they are agreeable to that. The second point B is noting that we still have to do a capital expenditure review for the Office of Local Government. The third thing is get clarification from the federal government with the LRCI Phase 1 project that we can proceed with the car park while we're still working through internally and externally our approval process for the Early Childhood Centre. I received notification of that this afternoon that they're agreeable to that. Point D, Council has advised the funding body seeking approval, the funding seeking approval from the Office of Local Government of the Capital Expenditure Review to be submitted in February.
Other questions, councillors? Councillor Morat.
Mr Mayor, there's a number of items in this business paper all pertaining to the Guyra preschool. This is just another indication that we've got projects going pear-shaped. We're trying to fire the architect, we're trying to rescope the project, we're going to do stuff internally. We want to go ahead with the car park when we haven't figured out what we're doing with the scope of the building. Where else can we figure out where we can stuff a project up and go wrong? We're moving forward without any direction.
You're asking a question, I'm sorry.
No, I'm making a statement.
Okay, well, you really should phrase it
as far as I'm
question.
concerned, we need to hold this project up until we can get an idea of the scope of it. Yeah. I believe there's $900,000 worth.
Well, I need you to say those things in debate. Okay.
All right, Mr Mayor.
Are there any questions? Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how the site was chosen for this, putting in the car park on the west side of Guyra, and whether other possible locations, such as near the current school, would have been a better outcome.
Thank you, Councillor. That was a subject of a motion. I can't remember exactly the meeting, but I think it was, from memory, it was about September last year where the administrator resolved that was the site. And sorry, what was the other part of the question about the car park, was it?
Locations were considered.
Okay. Are there further questions? Councillor O'Connor.
Councillor Robinson's asked a question that concerns me, which is that the site that's proposed is a pretty cold site. It's on the same westerly wind straight off the Mother of Ducks Lagoon aspect, which is fundamentally unsuitable for all the winter outdoor play school or preschool activities that
Your question, Councillor?
Yeah, my question is, on what basis was it determined that the preschool should be located at that site, that westerly, windy, cold site?
Thank you, Councillor. There were a number of factors. One of the primary ones was land that we already owned, so there was no extra cost there. The second factor, and this the manager of the preschools here will explain better than I, that we are regulatory bound to have features such as light, and I don't think it's dictated north facing, but we're under a lot of constraints about finding a site where you can have a lot of natural light. So the aspect of the Early Childhood Learning Centre at Guyra, if council approves it, will be more towards the Mackenzie end of the Mackenzie Street end of that site. So we're behind the council chamber building, and so the car park would go towards the Morden end. And you're right, that area has wind and it can be cold. So we're governed regulatory about the R factor that we will be told that we have to meet. So it's not something that we'll have any say in. There'll be a bare minimum standard on the level of insulation. The insulation factor?
Internal activities, but external and top of the range outside activities that all preschoolers deserve.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Other questions? If not, one question. Yes, Councillor Bowen.
Have you pursued? I made the suggestion about moving the preschool up to Guyra Secondary School or Guyra Central School, and there did seem to be some interest from the Education Department. Has that reached a conclusion, and is it out of the question?
Councillor, after that last meeting, we did take your advice, and we did speak to the principal, including the manager here, speaking to the principal. She felt she wasn't ready at that stage, and that seemed to be reinforced when we had the Department of Education come up and speak to us, that they gave some advice that the Guyra Central School wasn't in a position to do that at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Can we move to debate? Is there a mover of the officer's recommendation? Is there a motion somewhere? Ask again, is there a motion, either the officer's recommendation or another? Councillor, yep. You're moving the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Is it seconded? Seconded by Councillor O'Brien. You'll get your chance to speak against, but we now have a mover and a second who have the right to speak first. Councillor? Thank you. Councillor O'Brien? No. Now it's you. Councillor Morat.
Mr Mayor, could I add an amendment to that motion? Most of that stuff there, getting rid of the architect, I'm happy with. We've got some regulatory stuff there. We've got to report to a couple of government departments, but I'd like to add a section with ABC. What are we up to? D. Add an E in there.
Okay.
That the project be stopped or paused until such time as we have a scope that the council approve. Because at the moment we're firing an architect, doing a scoping on the run. We're trying to build a car park with no definite plan for a preschool on a site. Why would you want to build $1 million car park on a site if we don't proceed with the preschool on that site?
Yeah,
So,
the mover and the second are happy to add Part E, that the project be paused until it is...
a report come back to council maybe next month.
It is scoped in more detail. Okay? Is that okay? That's okay, isn't it?
I am under a clock with LRCI. Those funds have got to be expended by the 30th of June. And the other comment I guess I'd make on the LRCI project with the car park, when we put it to the federal government, the funding body, the car park doesn't just serve a proposed preschool, it serves the council, the university hub, the library, the community hub and the HAC building, and they've confirmed to me they're happy in terms of the car park side of things. So they acknowledge, they acknowledge that the preschool is still going through a number of processes, but they're happy that a car park is being built and it will be built to service all of those facilities.
To you, Mr. General Manager, how soon could you bring a report back to scope in more detail this project? Could we have that perhaps as an extraordinary meeting in advance of our workshops next week on budget?
I'd have to defer to Mr. McDonald, but I don't think we could pull it together that quickly. I would have thought with the expenditure, capital expenditure review and a few of those other issues, we probably need the month. So I'd say the earliest in answer to your question would be March meeting.
None of us want to give back grants, that's my concern. So we'll... Yeah, so...
Or does this motion put the grant in danger?
It's a difficult one. Sorry. It's a difficult one to answer. The federal body has basically said they're happy with that project, even if a preschool doesn't hang off it. There are a number of grant funds there where the clock's been ticking. I think one of them has been on the books now for about 2 years or so, the CCCF capital funding. So I guess the date I could offer up, if it was any use, is the acting general manager and now the financial controller asked for a business case review. They've given us an undertaking. They're up here this Friday looking at it. They've given us an undertaking. They'll have that review by the 9th of March. So come the 9th, 10th, 11th of March, we'll be in a position to give you that pretty important part of the puzzle.
And that's when we have the budget workshops in that week. So could we dovetail those two together? Okay. You happy with that?
Yeah, well, it makes logical sense. We get a business case before we do the scoping. Yes, I'm happy with.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask a question on this, and the question really is, can anyone confirm that the total loss, if the average of 75 users for each free session paid the $12 fee, would be $900 a session, which is the way I calculate it. I don't understand the double counting in this case, and my estimate would be it would be $900 a session. Is that correct? If everybody is taking up the offer of free green waste and actually paid the fee.
Thank you for your question.
I'm not sure I understand exactly. I asked the waste team to give us a quantified figure of the revenue foregone as those people came through on those days. So the cost breakdown, I'm sorry if it's missing something, but the gate fees, 450 loads at $12 a load, plus all those other associated costs. So I'm sorry if I don't quite understand the rest of it.
I can see if those people, actually just the 75 people each time put in their waste and pay the $12 fee, that all the other costs would still apply. So the only loss to council is the $12 gate fee for each per user.
Or having a free day, those costs are going to come. And we found when those people were turning up on those free days that we required extra work. So they had to be, I guess they had to be processed. You have your fee, the gate fee, and an extra cost of, doesn't matter if it's free or not free, you've still got a loader, you've still got the processing cost and the contractor. So I guess we're trying to give you the gross cost associated with that vegetation. So the only way you'd avoid those costs if you didn't bring in that mulch at all. So I can't answer to you, did people make a decision to bring mulch in that they wouldn't otherwise bring? I can't answer. All I can tell you is what we think the gross costs associated with those free days add up to.
Thank you. Can we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? or some other motion?
Well, I'd like to move an alternative motion that, in view of the fact that the only apparent loss is the $12 gate fee for 75 users each month, and which would...
Say it slowly, please. We've got to have it typed.
In view of the fact that the only loss to council appears to be the $12 gate fee per user, or $900 per session, that we continue the sessions for March, April, May and June this year.
I'm not sure, and I have to take advice that again we're varying a fee and a charge, so I'm not sure that we even got that completely right back in when we did it in July last year. So this to propose further days, which are essentially nil charge on a council service, I'm not sure. I'd have to defer to the General Manager whether we could do that without going through the fees and charges process.
So if I understand correctly, through you, Mr. Mayor, this was never actually adopted through the budget process, was it? Yeah, no. So realistically, yeah, in theory at least, it should stop now that we've identified it, and we shouldn't be continuing it without a formal. If it's going to be part of fees and charges, it really should be worked through that process.
Okay, well, on that basis, I don't feel I can accept the alternate motion. Is someone prepared to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Morat, Councillor Connor. Is there opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour to the contrary. Moving to the 14 series, I call them 14.1. Acquisition and removal of former school building, Bradley Street. It's been called. 14.2 has been called. 14.3, the makerspace. 14.4, sister cities. 14.5 by Councillor Gallatley. So we take a motion to adopt 14.3 and 14.4. Councillor Bailey and Councillor Morat in opposition. Put the motion. All those in favour. To the contrary, carried. 14.1 on page 114. Would the officer need to introduce this report? Let's see what it is.
It's
Sorry.
Do you have a question, Councillor? You do.
Sorry.
to be part of this problem with organising the scope and the location and the possible pause in relation to the location of the preschool. Is this the one that talks about getting rid of that old building to Mr. and Mrs. Corley, of course?
Yep, thank you, Councillor. This was an expression of interest that was called last year, and we have deferred it a couple of times. There are 4 buildings up behind the council chambers that are at their end of their life, irrespective of any project, whether it goes forward or not. They're 2 old school buildings that have been moved now 2 or 3 times. We have no further use for them. We can't use them, and they have a high maintenance cost. So my advice is it's in the interest of council to take this offer.
Thank you. Is someone prepared to move the officer's recommendation? Councillors O'Connor and Morat. Any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. Adoption of the library strategic plan. Do we need an officer to introduce?
I was going to move an amendment to the officer's recommendation. Is that all right?
No officer to introduce?
And that is...
Excuse me, Councillor. I'm asking whether there's an officer to introduce this report item. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to adopt the library strategic plan. It previously came to council in draft format and then went on public exhibition. There were no submissions received in relation to it, partially because there was a lot of community consultation with a number of stakeholder groups beforehand, and this is proposing adoption.
Thank you.
It's in response to that, and as you will appreciate,
Do you have a question? Or you're moving the motion?
No, I'm moving an amendment.
Pardon?
I'm moving an amendment.
No, well, there's no motion on the floor.
To the motion, to recommend
So
officer's recommendation.
let's take a motion from you.
Well, the motion, I move the motion with the addition of
You're
Part
moving the
C,
officer's recommendation with the addition of
Part C, which I'm about
Part
to
C.
state.
Yep, we got there.
That nothing in the library strategic plan be interpreted as dispensing with the requirement of council to employ qualified librarian staff. Sorry, that nothing in the library strategic plan B, so there's an insertion of the word BE after the word plan, interpreted as dispensing with the requirement of council to employ qualified librarian staff. So Councillor O'Brien and I have had a little discussion and...
Just a moment, please. That's your motion.
Yeah.
Your motion is
Yeah.
the first two parts being the officer's recommendation plus Part C. Councillor O'Brien, are you seconding that? Okay, I think before we move on, it might be wise to have some comment from the General Manager in relation to Part C.
The only question would be, have you come across something in there that perhaps gives that feeling? Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, hang on a second.
No? Okay.
You're the mover. Councillor O'Connor, do you wish to speak first?
Yes, all I'm wanting to say is that there's been trouble down at the ranch in the past, which we're moving on from, and I'll defer to my seconder in relation to this to explain the details, but we have chatted with some people and it appears that there's just one ambiguity in relation to the possibility of dispensing with qualified librarians, which I'm sure wouldn't be in anticipation, but the advice we've had is that there's some ambiguity in the document itself in relation to that matter. So, for abundant caution, we've decided to seek the governing body's approval for Part C.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that having spoken to Friends of the Library today, and anyone who knows this group, they have been amazing volunteers for many, many years and have donated a lot to the library. And, you know, we're really very, very happy with this strategic plan. They wanted to also thank Council very much for their the fantastic consultation that they had with them. They didn't put in a submission because they thought the consultation was good and they're very happy with the document. But having been burnt, well, they had a very seriously difficult relationship in the past with the past administration. And their concern, and it was the concern of the library before, library people and those involved with the library, that qualified staff, unqualified staff were being put in positions in the library where professional people should have been employed, and there was certainly threats for vice versa for professional staff to be used in other areas. And it was all to do with, you know, the library hub that was going to be put there, but the administrator has knocked that on the head, so that's fantastic. But what they were concerned about was the use of A9, point A9 in the document, which in itself is fantastic. It's linking areas of council work, so they work together, and that is a fantastic idea. But there is possible, I suppose they're flagging it as a precautionary insight rather than wanting to hold up the policy, that this could also be ambiguously implying that, or could be used in the wrong hands, for people, unqualified staff, to be working in the library and qualified library staff to be used elsewhere. This has caused difficulty in the past, and they wanted to be sure that that was very clear, that they would continue with only having qualified librarian staff working in the library, and that it would never be used as a way of de-skilling or unprofessionalising, if you like, the library, which has such great esteem in the community. So that was their concern. I said I would raise this, that this ambiguity, that we would either have something in here as a precaution to no way do this in the future, because it has in the past caused terrible heartache and pain for the library users and for the library staff and for friends of the library. So that's the reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a speaker against?
What number of librarians would a city like ours, in Guyra, how many qualified librarians would be expected to have?
I would need to take that on notice to be able to do the maths on that, but I can get back to you.
And the second question is, if we have more, if it's say 4, one in Guyra and say 3 down here, and we've got 7, does that mean we're carrying an additional cost burden? Does that mean that, for instance, if we've got a position for 6 engineers and we've got 9, then we're paying an additional cost burden for that privilege?
I think in some ways it's a rhetorical question. So yes, well, I'll give you an answer in 40 minutes when we have to stop the meeting. So let's leave it there. The point's taken. Is there someone prepared to move the motion on the screen with the third part? Oh, that's been done. It has been done, I'm sorry. Is there violent opposition? Sure.
Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
if it's of any consolation to the council, absolutely no plans from me to de-skill the workforce.
Okay.
That's most gratefully received and will be conveyed to the
Thank you. Let's
library.
move on. Can we put the motion? All those in favour, to the contrary, carried. 14.5, the Guyra Main Street Public Art Project. Councillor Glatley, are there any questions in relation to the report first? No. Councillor Glatley, you wish to move something?
Yes. Can I move a motion wording that the council does not adopt either option 1 or option 2 that has been put forward, and refer this back to the arts and culture for them to reassess.
Thank you. I have a question. Is it correct that if we don't adopt this recommendation today, the grant has to be handed back?
We've not received formal notification, but it would delay the project and therefore put the grant at risk, and we would need to seek clarification from the funding body on whether they were willing to extend the project.
Yes, so there is a risk that we could lose the grant. Okay, you've moved the motion, which is on the screen, is it? Not adopt. Is that how it should read?
What are you suggesting?
All remarks through the chair, please. All remarks through the chair. You wishing to add to the motion?
I was just wondering if Councillor Glatley wanted to add to the motion anything about an alternative location that the committee could consider.
No, I don't think so. I think we're getting a little bit complicated there. I think we're putting the cart before the horse in that situation. No.
Is there a second to Councillor Gatley's motion? Yep. Councillor O'Connor. Your motion, Councillor.
Look, I don't have anything particular. I don't have anything against this whole project at all, except just in reading the report, there was 87 protests against this, but there was dissatisfaction with the design and not using of a local artist, and this seemed to cause a fair bit of angst. And there was also that I also read there that in the risk section was that members of the community have said if this mural goes ahead, it may well be vandalised. And so we go through with all of this, we spend whatever money on it, it's there for a week, and then we've got to spend money in either revamping it or starting all over again. I just think if we can, and I'm hoping that the process could probably go through to the first committee meeting of the Arts and Culture Committee, and probably do just, I know that sounds wrong, just targeting local artists because they might be able to hoodwink you a little bit, but discuss with them and get to something that maybe will be a good theme for the whole of the street, because obviously this here, even that we can put other murals up and stuff like that, I think if we stick with the Gora theme and what the Gora people want, the Gora people get, that makes them a bit happier. And I believe that that's the way to go. Thank you.
Seconder wish to speak?
No, very briefly, it's very clear that the Gora community have petitioned or recorded their resentment towards the imposition of an external artist and a theme that they don't subscribe to. And given the tenuous, difficult situation we're in the merger, and the need, I think, in a merger process like this to respect, not just provide money and upgrades and things for the Gora community, but to respect their sense of identity and purpose for themselves. I think it would be very much a symbolic and probably also financially sensible thing to just reassess this and listen to the protests about how this design and this particular artist has been selected. That's all. Just let's respect Gora people. They really need to have their own identity reinforced at the moment, not challenged and overborne.
Is there a speaker against? I speak against. Haven't spoken all day. I speak as the new chair of the Art and Culture Committee. This process commenced back in 2018, in February 2018, when the school children were engaged to give their ideas. We had a public art working group, then became involved, and they did some great things. Then in February 2020, we went out to expressions of interest to develop and to engage an experienced community artist. A long process. A small grant. I have little doubt, this is the second month that we've discussed this. If we don't get on with this, bear in mind this is a small mural on the side of a toilet block. There's money left in this vote to do other murals, to give the locals an opportunity. We have to recognise that art and the appreciation of art is in the eye of the beholder. Some locals at Gora would prefer horses and cows and stock whips. But that can happen next time round. Let's get on with it. Let's get this project done. Let's not lose the grant. Thank you. Speaker for. Speaker against. Right of reply, Councillor Glatley.
I really appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it's up Gyra's alley. Basically, if it was down at Sydney and Darling Harbour, or down in Melbourne, down at the waterway or something, I'd say you beauty. Or even if it was down down at the Mother of Ducks Lagoon on it down there. But I just don't think it really suits the Gyra people for what they want, as far as I've seen, and I have had a lot of conversations with a lot of Gyra people. So thank you for giving me that opportunity anyway.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? 4, against, 3, 2. I'll go again. Those in favour, raise your hands. 4. Those against, 3. The motion's carried. Item 17, minutes of the Traffic Advisory Committee. Is there someone prepared to move? Councillor Morat, seconded Councillor Bailey, thank you. Any opposition? Put the motion. All those in favour? To the contrary, carried. Questions on notice are all in your business paper. I propose, in relation to the 2 confidential items, to deal with them in open council, unless there is a councillor who wants to ask a question or questions in the confidential attachments. I'm going to call 20.1. Now, just a moment. I'm going to call them both. Anyone want to discuss 20.1 or 20.2? If not, I'll take a motion to adopt them both. Councillor Morat, seconded somewhere. Councillor Galatly, is there opposition? I put the motion. All those in favour? I think it's just carried. Councillors, that concludes at 7:50 p.m. the monthly council meeting.
Before we go, could I just ask one thing? Can we give consideration to reducing presentations to 1 15-minute presentation and maybe 3 5-minute presentations? We shouldn't be here at 8 o'clock at night, I'm sorry.
I've had discussions with the General Manager about that, and we're looking at revamping that, but...
Can I disagree with that and say that
Yeah,
I think it's if those who are...
I'll declare the meeting closed.
Oh, can I talk
now